I need you more. I need you more. I need you more.
Let's get ready to RPG!
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome back to Nights of Last Call here on a beautiful Thursday evening in late July 2023. I am your host, Derek Melinda, representing the Knights. You've been seeing a lot more of the Knights lately. You've been seeing Bob and Smith, and of course, Nick and Dirt over on our Tuesday streams where we have been playing Root. We got session 1 off to a start this week. A little bit of audio issues, but you know, we're making it work. Hopefully everybody is doing well this evening, and I'm happy that you were able to join us. So tonight we are going to be covering site-based adventure design, and well, more or less. Let's be clear here. This is really, I've got the stylus ready. We'll be going to the whiteboard. You know that already. This is really more of an AMA. Okay. This is not necessarily a dissertation or a lecture. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. Super chats and tips are extremely appreciated. We'll try to get to those with top priority. You could see that we have two goals for tonight's stream. We've got a $100 super chat goal, and if we meet that, we will get a champion class deep dive, aka the Paladin, for the last 45 years until we get to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And if we get $150 in stream element tips tonight, then later, not this month because it's almost over, but in August, we'll kick off a new world building series. I'm thinking maybe we'll do a 3 to 5 part series where we'll sort of, with chat, with some random tables, with some ideas, we'll just kind of go through it and we'll build kind of a cool campaign world for each other that maybe we could use in your home game. So regardless, whether we make those or not, feel free to ask your questions, because this is really all about you and how much, how I can help you try to be a better game master, or maybe you're thinking of dipping your toe into the realm of game mastery. That is what this is all for. So tonight's topic was driven by the patrons of the Knights of the Last Call Patreon. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit was how does site-based design drive adventure, and how do you use ideas and challenges to sort of create an experience? And a great way to do that is to compare and contrast how site-based design differs, or maybe is the same in certain ways, between your sort of classic OSR style games, your Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, your BX Basic, your Old School Essentials, your Labyrinth Lords, your Shadow Dark, I think is the newest Kickstarter, right? That traditionally have sort of defined the genre, versus a game like Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And what I want to do as a stream is sort of workshop what are some of the differences between those approaches and those systems, and how does that change the way that you have to approach site-based design? And maybe together we can come up with some pretty cool ideas, thoughts, suggestions, help that will allow us to sort of maybe solve some of these issues. Let's see here. Who do we got in chat today? I thought I had a mouse cursor. I do. All right. Frostjack is here. Welcome, Frostjack. Zerverus as well. Hello to you. Rule of Cool. Hello back. London. Hello. How are you? Frostjack reminding me that if Critical Role can have bad audio for the first 20 episode, I can have bad audio for the first 40 minutes. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the support. It was a little disappointing. I haven't given up yet on the lavalier mics, but I can't deny that the audio is just so much better when you have a gigantic, massive hunk of microphone in front of someone's face. It's just, it's annoying. It eats up some of the screen real estate. And then as a player, now you have to be thinking about this microphone. Now, for me, it's second nature because I've been doing this for thousands of hours over the last couple of years. But for my players who, pretty much do not stream, it can be kind of a learning curve. Let's call it that. Trevco said, I used the drive-through RPG code to pick up some of the books you talked about in one of those previous episodes. Sweet. Would that be all bookshelves or all books ranked? They have a pretty good sale going on. Drive-through RPG usually has some really great sales going on, and I know they do a summer sale, so that might be what's going on right now. KC is here. Welcome, KC, Mr. Roberts. Came to the live stream, but I have to return in an hour. All right, Satir, we will see you then. Gossamer, glad to see. Good to see you. Glad to see you. Von of Gaming, welcome. What is up, Jackal Torn Moons? Getting ready for Gen Con. Next Thursday, there will be no stream because I'm going to be in Indianapolis for the best 4 days in gaming. This will be my 21st or 22nd. Let's see. 2002 is when they first went to Indy, but I went in 2001. 22, and I missed. This actually will be my 20th Gen Con, actually, because I missed 20. Well, there was no Gen Con in 2020, but I missed 2021 and 2022. So there you go. So I haven't been since 2019. That was the last time I was at Gen Con. 2020, it got canceled because of COVID. In 2021, they had it. We had a room. I had badges bought, but I just didn't feel like there was still a lot of COVID precautions that I was taking. Then I just didn't feel like I wanted to risk it, so I didn't go. And then in 2022, I was prepared to go, but I couldn't get a good hotel room. And so, yeah. Oh, right, Lance. That's I completely forgot about that. All right. So this is number 19 then, not number 20, because in 2018, I was hiking the Appalachian Trail and I could not go. So there you go. So number 19. Number 19 doesn't sound as impressive as number 20. So next year will be the 20th time. Let's see here. Hey all, what's going on? Quiet day, huh? Yeah, absolutely nothing going on. Mike is making a joke about our Northern Reaches mega game, where 100 players are playing with the. I fixed the audio. What do you mean? Well, that was at the studio. I'm curious what you mean, Ben, that I fixed the audio. Let's see. Marvelous Mr. Mean, hello, welcome. Lolly, glad to see you. John says that site-based design is the best design. Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the pros and cons of it, and we'll kind of get into it, but we'll get into it. Oh, okay, no, the DM resources. Yeah, that was another good stream where I threw out a lot of resources. Tome of Adventure Design, Toolbox, a bunch of stuff from Kevin Crawford, Echo Resounding, Red Tide. So hopefully you picked up some of those. Those are great books. Okay, you were joking. It thunderstormed and rained here so hard last night, and today it's just been like a swamp. Hot, muggy. It's horrible. It's horrible. Anyways, in our Northern Reaches game right now, we have a bit of a political fiasco, as there's been accusations that the druidic powers gained by the Jagged Pine Pact have been exploited for the use of nature. And so there's a trial going on, and tempers are hot. People are taking it a little personally at times, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Like, I want people to care. I just don't want them to, be upset about it. And I guess it comes down to, it's all just about a expensive perspective. We're playing Root right now, and Root, as one of its core game rules, has a move called Aid or Interfere. And another PC can spend basically a hit point and turn someone else's roll from a success into a miss. And if you spend 2 points of exhaustion, they don't even know that you did it. But obviously the player knows that you did it because you're sitting at the same table. But your character doesn't know that the reason why they just failed is because they were interfered by another PC who is sitting at the table with you. That kind of gameplay, I love. When I played Monster Hearts in the past, I've had other PCs kill me before, and I just don't think anything of it. I just think, oh, this is great. This is fun. So I guess my perspective maybe sometimes on role-playing games is a little different maybe than some other people. And so, I just kind of make a mistake and assume that is the way that everybody handles it. So it's been a learning experience anyways. Ryan says, I love site-based design. I just want a way to connect them. Something that Tor 2nd edition lacks. A book that accomplishes this is coming out at least. Yeah, sure. So to get into it, let's start off by sort of really exploring the idea of what is site-based design. And fundamentally, site-based design is really all adventures can really be described as a series of nodes, right? It's a graph. You have a series of encounters that are linked to one another in some capacity. Now, that takes place in a lot of different ways. Let me go over to, you know where we're going. So all right. So like, for example, you could have an adventure that looks like this. And this could be these lines rather could represent time. They could represent actions, or they could represent space. And by that, I don't mean outer space. I mean physical location. And so what we're really describing here is that, all adventures, that are pre-written, that are sort of, designed specifically to be an adventure, ultimately all end up having this sort of node and edge structure. And some people refer to this concept as a point crawl. In fact, they actually take this a step further. We'll talk about this when we talk about site-based design. But in my personal experience, all adventures are kind of a point crawl. You simply have a series of options planned out that the party can take. Now, this is we'll get to why dungeons are so sweet in a second here. But because again, we've talked about some of this before, but I just want to reiterate. Wuppelstein with a $10 super chat. Bring on the champion. Also, I wish they chose champion for inclusion in the first player core book. The class most tied to alignments is not included in the book where they changed alignments. Maybe because they need more time to figure it out and, rewrite it. Because before, what sort of set those, the paths apart, I can't remember what they're called, vows, was alignment. Now, obviously, you can still have the Liberator and the Redeemer and, the whole things like that. But that's probably why it probably didn't get included, Probably not. So now some people may have the wrong idea of me. Now, to be clear, I love I love completely emergent random gameplay. If you watched Root on Tuesday, I had nothing prepared for that session. Okay. Now I was a little frazzled because of the audio issues. So maybe I wasn't on my best game, but I did not have any idea where or what or how the party was going to do. And I'm not going to spoil the episode if you haven't caught it yet, but needless to say, I would have never been able to accommodate or play or plan for anything that they did. All right. But I do agree. I mean, look, we're, if it's not champion Wuppelstein, it's another class. I mean, the other one, it's not like we have to wait another year, right? I think it comes out in February or March or something. It comes out pretty quick on the heels of the first one. So, and besides, maybe, well, it depends on how much time they have to printer. Maybe they'll sort of judge feedback on the first book, and maybe they saved classes that they really want to make big, significant changes to for the second book. And maybe if people are very responsive, the so-called, it's not a 2.5, it's a 2.1. But maybe if people are really, really happy with quote unquote 2.1, they'll kind of push, the second book to more like a 2.3 or a 2.4, right? Give it a little bit more, oomph in terms of the change. And again, remember, thank you for the tips, the super chats. Go ahead and keep dropping them in. But if you do have a question, go ahead and drop it in chat. Just make sure you include the word question in your statement, because that'll highlight it on my monitor and make it a little bit easier for me to find. All right. When I play a game like Blaze in the Dark or Root, I don't find myself having the need to make this because, to be clear, in a game like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, or, well, really any RPG, unless you want to force the players to have to go to a certain encounter, there is always a possibility that they will choose to go here. And this is not something that you plan for. You don't have that encounter prepared or ready. You thought, oh, well, if they try to sneak in to the castle, there's this option. Well, they could always try to assault the front gate. And then what if the PCs instead are like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to, we're going to come under a banner of truce, and we're going to try to, sort of take a diplomatic approach. And you're like, oh crap, I didn't really think about that. I want to be a cool, I want to be open. I want to allow my players the freedom to kind of do whatever they want. That is ideal. The problem is that in a game like D&D, but it's funny. It's funny that you said hang glider in, Ben. Originally, I was thinking, maybe they just want to fly in. I was actually thinking like flying into the middle of the castle. It's exactly the original thing that I was thinking of, 100%. And so that's awesome, right? The ability when the players are here, we need to get inside of this castle. How do we do it? And as a GM, you've sort of planned for these two eventualities. But again, we're all here. We're fans of true role playing games. I don't want to force my players to have to pick this option, A or B. If they want to go with C, I want to be able to provide them for that. The problem is that in games like Dungeons and Dragons, and certainly in games like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and I would even argue to a certain extent 4th Edition D&D, it's just much more mechanically complex to build a encounter on the fly. It doesn't even necessarily, when I say encounter, it doesn't have to be a combat encounter. There's just a lot more rules to reference. There's a lot more DCs and procedures to consider. There's just a lot more processing that needs to go into one of these encounters. Because even if you're playing in an old school game, it could be like, sure, it's still a D&D and you still probably need stats, but for the most part, there aren't really many rules to begin with. There's not complex skill feat interactions. There are no skills and there are no feats. So it's much easier as a GM to sort of just make a call and go with it. So it can be very, very difficult, in my opinion, in some of these games where you want some of this mechanical depth to mean something, to just throw these kind of encounters out at will. And one of the examples, that I give is in like a game like 4th Edition D&D, I was very hesitant to just throw a encounter at people, because if I wanted it to be something meaningful, I wanted it to be maybe a combat or a skill challenge. And those weren't necessarily things that I could just whip out of my back pocket. I felt like I really wanted to take the time to do a good job of preparing them. Thus, I, spent my time thinking about this, sneaking way in. And I certainly thought about the way of assaulting my way in. But I also don't want to force my players to do that. But this is where dungeons and site-based adventures, to a certain extent, have such a big advantage. Because in a point crawl or in a time crawl or in a decision crawl, these arrows really just represent vague concepts of where the group could go and which direction they could head in, where their choices might take them, and the number of choices that a person could make in this situation. Standing in a empty clearing a mile outside of the castle, the players could literally do anything. So, in our theoretical space, there are infinite or nearly infinite arrows that come off of this decision path. But in a site-based adventure like a dungeon, okay, we have walls. And in a site-based adventure, these aren't just metaphysical paths, right? They are literal paths. These are rooms. these are corridors, right? So the player can't go to C because C doesn't exist. That room does not exist. And so, the advantage is that my players can still legitimately do and go and do whatever they want to do, but I also don't have to constrain them because the rooms where they would go, I already have planned out. I know that they could go left or they could go right. They can't go straight. There is no straight. The room only has 2 corridors that leave it. And so that's the reason why like a site-based or a physical-based adventure design can be very, very compelling, is that it's very, very useful for your prep and for being able to sort of understand what are the options the players could get into, and at the same time, not constrain them. Now, of course, like I said before, you do need to think about the layout of these point crawls, because you do want, this may look like a point crawl, but it's not, right? It's just a series of encounters that go one way. And there's only one way to proceed through this. And you could say, but I have, that encounter and I have this encounter. Yeah, except, the fact of the matter is there's still, only one main throughway through the adventure. There's not really, different approaches and options. Now, to be clear, there's a lot of groups out there that for which I think a very simple structure could do. Like, for example, like you could have a basic setup like this. And fundamentally, what you've done here is you've basically said there are 4 different ways that the party could go through this dungeon, right? They could go this way. They could go this way. 2. They could go this way. 3. So there you go. They could go this way. 4. So there's 4 ways that the party could reach this room. That's 4 different experiences that they would have. That's not bad, right? That's not the worst thing in the world. If you've essentially created a world where this encounter, and this encounter are optional. It's possible that they will not be included in your game. And so you are giving the players choices. I think that a design like this is not probably the most, it's probably not the most intriguing, but I think we could do better. But at the same time, if you're talking about making a 1-session dungeon or maybe a few session dungeon, you don't want it to be so complex that it's going to take them months to go through. So you're somewhat limited in what you can do anyways. I think anytime you can create any sort of actual real compelling choices, I think that's a cool option, because that'll get into really what the whole point of site-based design is. And site-based design is about exploration. And that's kind of the name of the game. That's why we use dungeons. That's why we use overland travel. It's why we use point crawls. It's because at a fundamental level, we want to explore. If exploration isn't something that you or your group are interested in, if all you're interested in is talking in town, if maybe doing skill checks, maybe just pure fluffy bullshit time role playing, or maybe you all just really want combat, then exploration is actually going to be a hurdle to those things. I'm not saying like, if your game has combat, you can't have exploration. Of course not. I'm simply saying that if you are going with a site-based design that is more complex, then the reason you are doing that is because you want to give your players a lot of choices. And in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, this is literally, in the exploration phase of the game. Because that's where you kind of want to spend the majority of your time. And that if you were to have a game session that took place entirely within the exploration phase, that would not be a lost, a wasted time. Ryan says, you did no prep for Root prior to the game, with exception of session 0 stuff. Impressive. That is correct. Obviously I've played the board game. So, I have some sense of that, but no, I had no no preconceived notions of anything that we were going to do. I made a couple random rolls from the back of the root table in the middle of the session to get some ideas of what could happen. And I sort of relied on my sort of knowledge of, which to be fair, just came from the session 0 that we did with chat. And then from the bonus stream that we did on Sunday for the river otters and the lizard cult, and just sort of said like, what should derive naturally from the fiction, from those actions and those events. Obviously, given that, we created Excalibur, I wanted that to be sort of a primary point of comparison. The other thing too, we're getting off topic here, is I, as a GM, right? I want to ask questions, right? So when I'm a GM, what I want to do is I want to ask my PCs, actually, I really want to ask my players questions, right? Like, and I want to find out the answers through play. So like my motivation and my goal, I mean, I hate to say it in other ways, I kind of like to stir the pot a little bit as a GM, I like to mix up some trouble. I want to create a scenario where, it's like, hey, the players have a choice. They can either get in bed with this faction and, do what they want them to do, or they could betray them. I wonder what they'll do. I don't know. Derek does not know what they will do. And, I play to find out what happens, right? Like I want to be surprised as much as anybody else. So right off the bat, when they were like, yeah, hey, we're going to make a replica of this Excalibur and we're going to try to pass it off as a forgery. When they immediately took both jobs from the Otters and from the Marquisate and tried to deliver on both of them, when they were willing to go full terrorism to take out the Airy inside of Sundell, those were all surprises to me, and that's what made it so enjoyable and so fun. All right, so when you're designing a site-based adventure, you have to realize that there's a couple of things that you need sort of to make the exploration compelling. All right. We could think about this in terms of, I guess we can kind of think about this in terms of like, combat and Pathfinder too. But what you want to do is you want to create, sort of buffs and sort of debuffs, right? Another way to describe it would be, boons and banes. If all of the paths through your exploration are the equal and the same, then the choice that they make doesn't matter. What you want to offer to players is an opportunity to either maybe acquire a boon, or maybe it's an opportunity to not acquire a bane or a debuff as they make their way through the exploration. You want to tempt them. You want them to be curious. Now, this is where we run into the very first hurdle or problem that we need to solve. And we can kind of do this, maybe we'll do this as a chat because I don't necessarily know that I have the best exact answer. Traditionally, in an old school game, one of the ways that you offered your players an enticement, a boon to go exploring was treasure. And, I should say treasure, and I'll say and or magic items, because those are kind of two separate concepts in the context of D&D, original D&D. Because remember, I always miss you, buddy. Where'd you say here? All right, Damian Williams, the $2 super chat. Customer delayed me. Can you start over? Sorry about that, buddy. Actually, packaging up your Traveler book, Damian, and your shirt today. So those should be both in the mail tomorrow, coming your way. So appreciate that. Appreciate the support and the luck. You've been doing really well. It's because you gave away that OSC. Lady Luck has just been shining down on you. All right. Now, we talk about before about like, what is a game? What makes a game, right? We talk about the Jared Sorensen's like ideas of, what is this game about? And what do the mechanics do? And how does the game reward you, right? Now, this last part is particularly important for exploration because fundamentally, the reason why people explore is because they're curious about something. They want to see what that promise might hold, right? We've all been there, right? Whether it's in a video game or a D&D game, there is nothing sweeter, right, than like you find the treasure chest, okay? And you get to open it. And you have this wonderful experience of, I wonder what's inside. And this concept of, sort of figuring out what your players want is super important. Because while the game might reward you in certain ways, what's more important is figuring out what motivates your players. Because if your players don't care about what the game is rewarding you, well, you might have a different problem, right? You might be playing the wrong game. But if we look at, kind of old school D&D, player characters were pretty boring, right? You didn't have feats, you didn't have skills. So what made your character cool and awesome was magic items. Magic items let your character fly or talk to plants or, be able to deal damage to the undead or, any of the crazy things that magic can do. They were, magic items in original Dungeons and Dragons were kind of like today's feats and skills. The way that everybody gets really excited when they level up because most of the time they're not really excited because, they got another +1 to their D20. They're mostly excited because they get a cool new feat and they get a cool new power. Okay. That's what makes them excited to play the game. So what if your game didn't have feats, or what if it did have feats, but you didn't get them from leveling up? What if the way you got feats was through exploring? And if magical items were sort of the old school version of feats, this then became a very, very powerful motivator because the concepts of like what your character must have and needs to have didn't really exist as much in the original game. There was nothing that said you needed to have a +2 sword by this level. You needed to have a +3 sword by that level. That sort of concept of game balance didn't exist. Magical items were essentially magic. And so they allowed your character to do more than you could ordinarily. And of course, TTRPGs were brand new. Fantasy game was original. For all intents and purposes, your character wasn't that different from you. You're both a person. Maybe you're an elf, so you're a person with pointy ears, or maybe you're a halfling and you're a person, but you're short. But fundamentally, you were still a person and you could identify with that. And maybe to a certain extent, you were a medieval person and you understood knights and swords and stuff like that. So when that character can suddenly fly or walk through walls or turn into vapor, right? Your mind sort of, explodes with possibilities, and it really allows you to start thinking about, what else could my character do now? Now I really do feel like my character is capable of doing so much more than they could do before. Now, I don't want this to sound like I'm ranting against Pathfinder 2nd Edition, because I'm not. But I will say the following. Part of the problem with this magical item feat equivalency, okay, if we assume that there's this idea of the magical item feat equivalency, remember, magical items in old school games were not something that you had to have. They weren't part of your character's pre-planned progression, right? There was no, oh, you need a striking rune by level 4, maybe level 5. You do need a +2 weapon by, level 8 or level 9. Your character wanted magical items because it was like gaining these benefits. Well, our characters want feats as well. Here's the problem. Feats introduced this problem, and this, again, is not really related to site-based design. It's more related to the understanding of the equivalency here. A lot of times when you look at a feat, you go, okay, yeah, but what is that, though? Like, what is power attack? What is that? Is it some special training? Okay, well then, can I go train in that? Well, maybe is it some sort of like genetic thing? Okay, but why didn't I have it before? And now suddenly I have it now? It introduces a lot of problems because feats are this idea of a skill or an ability that in a certain sense you could think, oh, I could get how I could do that if I trained hard enough or if I spent enough money or things like that nature. Magical items don't have that problem, okay? Somebody who puts on boots that now enable them to fly is no one's ever going to turn and go, well, can I just fly? No, we understand fundamentally that you need the magical item to fly. You have a cloak which lets you turn into vapor and, pass through small gaps in the doors and the walls. No one is ever going to sort of add in an idea of, oh, can't my character kind of just, if I try really hard, if you're familiar with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? The character, Arthur, learns how to fly by throwing himself at the ground and missing. There is none of that going on in our fantasy games, right? There's no way to naturally fly. So this introduces a problem because it's kind of difficult sometimes to think of feats as being a reward because the players aren't really getting the feat, are they? They're not really making a choice, right? If I get to level 2 or 4, I get the feat, right? I get the feat. Like, I didn't have to do any, yes, I had to go and get the experience, but I just get the feat. There's no, there's no in-game reason for why I suddenly have this ability. Now, we make it up, we like to, actually, most people probably don't even think about it. If we're really being honest, you just pick your level 4, level 6 feat. When you get to level 6 with your barbarian, are you really thinking about, why did I get attack of opportunity? I'm sorry, reactive strike. What was my character doing? Was I training? Was I working with somebody? Like, no, we just write it on our sheet and we just sort of move on, right? Whereas with a magical item, okay, everything that your character gains or does is going to have a story attached to it, right? You don't level up to 4 and then your GM says, here are boots of flying. No. You all defeated a genie, a wind air elemental, and then bound its spirit into these magical leather boots, and they became boots of flying or boots of levitation. And everyone's like, cool, I earned that magical item, and it gives me a really, really cool ability. Feats have a problem where you can't really use them in the same way as magical items because magical items are something that you can reward. And if it's something that you can reward, then it's a boon. And if it's a boon, it's something that you can use in your exploration-based game. Let's go back to our little example here, all right? Let's say you're playing in an old school game with me. And, we'll make this very, very simple and basic. So, the dungeon is here. And, the good king of the realm has charged you with defeating the horrible ogre that lay at the end of, the caves of death. Cool. We get it. Caves of death. Go get the ogre. But then, what if, now, and fundamentally, maybe, what if all the XP that you would get from this dungeon is tied into the ogre, right? Doesn't matter which way you go. You don't get the experience points till you get the ogre. That's how you get your 700 XP. Then you're probably saying, well, then we would want to go this way, right? We would want to take the shortest path. We'd want to avoid as much as we can. And then between these two, we would want to take whichever is the easier fight, right? Whichever is more optimized for us. So why would we ever want to go here? Well, what if I told you that this Cave of Death actually was a very ancient, site of, some evil cult? The ogre is just the person who's right here, right now, living in this space. But off the beaten path, off of the main entrance of the dungeon, there is an ancient, mausoleum or an ancient crypt, which is guarded by a horrible and terrifying wight. And if you've ever played old school D&D, wights literally drained your character's levels away from them. Huge risk. And if you're level 1 and you get hit by a wight once, you're dead. But the great, the sacred profane weapon, the night blade, is said to rest in here as well. And it's a magical sword of mystical properties. And one of those abilities is it allows your character to pass into the shadow realm. This is the 1970s. It's the 1980s. We're just stealing from Lord of the Rings because it's still probably pretty niche back then. And lets you become intangible in phasing, but it drains your constitution for every 10 minutes or hour that you're in the shadow realm. But while you're there, you can't be affected. It's like, okay, wow, that sounds amazing and awesome. My character can't even close to do that. Yeah, I want to go get that sword. But there's a tough fight, or maybe it's a deadly trap, or maybe it's a puzzle, or maybe it's none of those things. It's just secret. And in order to even find it, you have to know what you're looking for or be clever. The point is, my character has a motivation. My player has a motivation to want to find this thing. That is very powerful. Because now you have given the character a choice. Do we take the straight line path to the ogre? Or do we look for this magical sword? And if we're looking for the magical sword, what is that going to cost us? And what problems is that going to cause for us? Now, before we get too far down this line, I do want to point something out. You can do this in Pathfinder 2nd edition. Okay? Obviously, we can't, you could, but generally speaking, you're not going to just start rewarding feats or anything like that. But what you can do is you can make and give and hand out really compelling magical items. And by the way, this is something that I do, Aaron does all the time. All right. So I don't know why this thing switches to red. It won't switch to black. There we go. If your characters are level, let's say 4, in Pathfinder 2. So, they probably have +1 striking weapons, right? Nothing else, super, maybe they have a real low level rune on it, right? Like a low level property rune. None of the good ones, right? No crushing, no, none of the elemental runes. And your level 4 party goes into a dungeon and maybe they know about it before, or even a site, right? It could be anywhere. So I'm telling you, what do you need to do to make site-based adventures compelling? And what it really comes down to is you need to create rewards that encourage them to explore. If you can do those two things, then you'll have a successful site-based adventure. And we always talk about player agency. The players need to know. So you either need to have a way that the characters know what special treasure might await them inside the dungeon before they ever get there. That's kind of like the long, slow burn, right? Where you tell them about it. And now suddenly, right from the beginning of your dungeon, the players have sort of competing goals. I really want to find that. I don't really care about that because it's a sword and my character's a wizard and I don't really care about magic swords. But the fighter really wants to find that. Yeah, but we also want to kill this ogre? We do. If we wait too long, won't he get stronger? Maybe. So, right, suddenly there's a push-pull, there's tension, there's interesting choices being made. But to do that, you got to make it compelling. All right, if you're level 3 or level 4, look, unless your players have absolutely no idea what's going on in your Pathfinder 2 game, okay? If you are level 4 and you're like, oh, there's a legendary sword, it's a +1 striking weapon, right? Anybody who's been playing Pathfinder 2 for a while is going to go, that's what you're supposed to have. But what if I dropped a +2 striking, flaming, sword in this dungeon? Ooh, now that is much more compelling. You're looking at that weapon. And by the way, if you're looking at that weapon, you're going, Derek, isn't flaming a level 8 rune? And isn't a +2 potency plus a level 10 item? It sure as shit is. Won't that break that character? Won't that make that character more powerful than they should be? Yes. That in and of itself is not a crime in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. There's nothing that says that will ruin your game or that you shouldn't do those things. But what I am telling you is if you do those things, realize it's like, it's like breaking the seal on an electronics, when you open it up to fix it yourself. You've voided the warranty, right? You are giving your characters or your players something that is compelling and stronger. That is going to make them stronger. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you need, and you have to give it to them in a sense that, like I said, maybe it's a really tough puzzle, or maybe it's a really tough combat. They have to earn it. You're not just giving it to them to give it to them. So you can do this in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. You can tempt players to explore through rewarding them magical items, but realize that in old school D&D, it was enough to just tempt them with a magical item. In fact, at a certain point, because again, your characters really just did not get damn near anything for leveling up, right? Your attack bonus got a little better. Your saving throws got a little better. You didn't get armor class. You didn't get skills. You didn't get feats. You didn't get, a couple of the real premium classes got some cool class features. But other than that, for the most part, all you got was hit points and better saving throws. If you wanted to do cooler things, if you wanted to do crazy things, you needed magical items. In fact, we talked about this when we talked about the monk, and we kind of previewed the paladin, which is one of our tip goals today, which is if you look, the monk and the paladin in original Dungeons & Dragons had all sorts of really, really cool, crazy abilities, but they also kind of were balanced because they couldn't keep that many magical items, because the idea was, well, you kind of get so many from your class. It'd be kind of overkill if you had a bunch of really cool magical items and a bunch of cool monk and paladin abilities. But in original school or old school D&D, there was no math to fuck up. There was no, that was the reward that you were giving your players. If you're playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition, your characters are already, number one, expected to get certain items at certain times. A lot of people play with automatic bonus progression. I did in Quest for the Frozen Flame, because I was like, well, I don't want this game to be about finding treasure. But guess what? That's fine. I could do that. But you know what? That removed, right? That removed a lever. That removed a dial that from what I could use in order to tempt and encourage my players. So when magical items become part of the expected progression of the game, I think that sort of loses a lot of the what makes them cool and interesting. But on a further note, because magical items were not a given, right? Every magical item was a true treasure. There was no magical item shops, or if there was any idea, creating a magical item was a lengthy and epic process. That was not just something that you made a D20 check or spent some gold and it just popped out of the thin air. It would have been a quest into itself. I mean, if you've ever read some of the old school D&D stuff, you know that it's like, oh, you want to make a wand of lightning bolts? Okay, well then you need to go and kill a blue dragon with a stick and take a full charge from its breath weapon while holding the wood, which will become the wand. And then once that's created, you need to bathe it in Behir blood And, right, magical item creation was a literal epic quest into itself. It was like forging the One Ring. So magical items were very, very special and important. So kind of any of them would do. But in a game like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, magic items are competing. They're competing against feats. They're competing against class abilities. They're competing against the fact that players are just expected to get certain magical items at certain points of the game. And so that means that the pop, the sizzle, the wow factor of magical items in Pathfinder 2nd Edition is really, really, really diminished. And the only way, because again, your characters are more capable. They have more just cool abilities just from leveling up. A player character could reasonably say, I don't really care about magical items. I have enough cool things that I can do by just using my feats.
Guardian of the Rune tipped $3. Forbidden Lands is the best Oz game out there. All of the adventures published for it are site-based and have you exploring the entire region, but it also has many thoughtful random encounters that aren't just combat. Thanks for deep discussions as always.
Thank you, Guardian of the Rune. I got to be honest with you. I'm really into Forbidden Lands. I mean, Year Zero engine, I got to admit, a little on the fence about. There's certain elements of it that I love it, but I don't love it. But the idea of that kind of very procedural exploration kind of game is really good. Cannot hear the stream elements bot. Oh no. Why not? It's just quiet. All right. All right. Well, next time someone stream tips, I'll just. Okay, you heard it. I probably just had it turned down too much, Ben. Yeah, I had it like turned down like negative 15 decibels. So, we also had a member shout out from Shadram. Hello, I am also late. Oh, because Vin was late to the party. Welcome, Vin. Glad to have you. By the way, Vin, am I spoiling this? Vin might, is more than likely, I think at this point, locked to be coming our way this fall, and we're gonna get him in the studio. We're gonna try to make hay while the sun is shining, as they say. So make good content while Vin is in town, and is the moral of the story. So I'm really looking forward to that. Shadram is also late and made it for the whiteboard chat. Yes, of course. So we have other things to talk about. We'll get to the other element of it, but first and foremost, site-based exploration, site-based design is good because it encourages and rewards exploration. Why do I like exploration? I like exploration because it's very player agency full, right? It has a lot of options for characters and players to make choices. And again, to have true player agency, in my opinion, the players have to have a reasonable idea of what they can expect to gain and what are the costs or risks. You don't necessarily have to tell them every detail, but they should know that, hey, that road is more dangerous, but might have higher upside. That road might be easier, but has lower upside. Or sometimes it could just be like, hey, that road sucks. That road's great. And because your character acquired certain amount of knowledge or a certain amount of information, you know that you shouldn't go left, you should go right. So that sometimes, removing a bad choice can be a reward. It's not as good, of course, but there's different ways that you can reward players and create agency in exploration, which is why I like it so much. But fundamentally, you have to give them a reason to explore. And I know there's been a lot of great chat, so I'm going to kind of scroll back up. But, somebody said, and I'll probably highlight it again, but they basically said, exploring just to explore is totally, is fine, is fun, is awesome. You know what? I completely agree with you. I don't think there's anything wrong with a player enjoying exploration just for the sake of exploring. I mean, that's very pure and awesome. But also understand that at a fundamental level, if you have a group of players who all really love exploring for exploration's sake, and they don't really care what they get or what they do, you're dealing with probably a pretty unique group there. So most people want to have their cake and eat it too, right? When I'm playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons, when I'm playing a game as a player, I want to go to, the crystal caves of wonder. I want to go to, the aberrant laboratory, right? I want to go to these cool, evocative places, and I want to get to see the cool world building that the GM has done. And I want to see the really awesome chamber where the flesh golems are being made, and there's kind of a, Dr. Frankenstein-esque a lightning apparatus shooting bolts of lightning around. I want to see that. I want to hear it. I want to be there. I want to just get described to me 100%. But I also want there to be really cool and fun and compelling rewards and choices and consequences at the same time. I think that is right. We're here to elevate our game from C to B to A, right? And that's where I think that we need to kind of make sure that we're rewarding people appropriately. All right, so we got here. London says, magic items bore me in 3.x moving forward. This is probably why. I actually agree with you, London. I mean, 3.x, 3rd edition, really sort of commoditized magical items. It made them part of the core progression of the game. It removed most of the wonder from them. It turned them into a math formula, literally. In fact, it's a math formula that I know so well, even years later, I could still probably bust it out like from memory. Like weapons, I think were 2,000 gold times the inherent bonus squared. I think armor and shields was 1,000 times bonus squared. A command word activated magical item was 1,800 gold times caster level times spell level divided by 5 divided by times uses per day. But if you made that use activated instead of command word activated, then it was 2,000 gold times caster level times spell level divided by 5 divided by uses per day. So, anyways, point is, that's not wonderful, right? Like that, it did really remove a lot of the flavor and fun of magical items. Ben says, getting to 4 hit die opens the keys to the kingdom in OD&D, but magic items definitely shortcut that progression. And I think that's why they're so compelling and they're so fun. And I agree with you that, a cool magical item can be a really, really fun experience to have in OD&D or BXD&D in a way that it just isn't in, say, 3rd edition and onward. Catazor, I missed your hello. Hello, Catazor. Ryan says feats are anime as fuck. I agree. London asks, is this a problem with feat design or overtuning of feats? They're not believable as progression of skill or ability. No, I think the problem is just that you can't reward them, right? You can't reward feats. I mean, a case in point, as an example, and now again, you could do this, right? But in one of my campaigns, we've done this multiple times because it was very popular. My players like it. There was an example of where this was a Pathfinder 1 campaign. I'm not sure which campaign it was, but the group found this ancient master of martial arts, and they kind of made their way through his gauntlet or whatever, and they encountered him, and he said, he praised them for their great skill, and he agreed. He said, if you will spend the next, 90 days with me, I will teach you my ancient technique. And he did, or they did, and they picked up an ability which let them basically, like, I think as a reaction, they could like make a counteract check with their attack roll to sort of parry an incoming attack, right? So it was like an attack of opportunity if somebody attacked you, but you weren't attacking them, you were attacking the attack. And if you succeeded, then, it was basically what is those things called? A contested die roll. If your attack roll was higher than the monster's attack roll or your foe's attack roll, their attack got countered. And that was that was actually training. That was skill. That was ability. But they didn't level up to get that. That wasn't something they picked out of the book. that was something I gave them because they trained with, I don't know, we'll call him Limu Bai, and they proved themselves worthy to be one of his students, and yada, yada, yada. And by the way, the advantage with doing that is, see, a feat, if you make that a feat, which you shouldn't, but let's say you made it a feat, well, then guess what? Anybody can just take the feat, right? Once you make it a feat, it becomes official. It feels like something that if you just level up, anybody could take this. It's kind of like magical items in 3rd edition. Special abilities like, yeah, did they get the Jade Destiny as well? Yes. When you give players something, a reward that they understand came from the world, right? Not from the game. I think that is what makes it so. I think that's what makes it different. I think it increases the verisimilitude. And that's what I think is really, really, really important about all of this. Let's see here. Shadram says, I've started making my own magic items in PF2 to give out as treasure, but they all have to be broken to be interesting. I'm okay with that, though. And to a certain extent, I think that that's true. Aaron is using relics as rewards. They're almost like magical items and feats together. I do like the relic system in Pathfinder 2nd edition. I do like it. Ben says the section on 2nd edition magical item creation was great. That's the one I was referencing where you basically have to go on super ultimate quests in order to make magical items. Magical items being special is one of the things that modern D&D systems really miss the mark on. And I completely agree. Magic items, especially in Pathfinder 2nd edition. Number one, they feel, right? They feel controlled. They feel limited. They don't feel magical. Magical, in my mind, is the impossible. It is something that is outside of what feels like it should even be allowed or able to do. Magic items are so tightly controlled in Pathfinder 2nd edition that they just lose that punch, that pizzazz. But also, they're expected. When you get a magical item, you're not like, wow, what a gift. You're like, of course we got a magic item. We're playing a D&D game. We're playing a role-playing game. You get magic items. That's just what happens when you play the game. And third, and most important in Pathfinder 2nd edition, they're competing against, really cool, awesome feats. Hey, I've got a magic item. It makes me fly. Yeah, well, I have a feat which lets me rocket across the sky as a double action and lets me fly through the air and make 3 attacks at people as I zip through the air. There's actually an archetype that can do that. That's a feat, right? How are you supposed to compete with that? You can't, It's tough. Especially when the player goes, and I don't have to do shit to get that. I just have to get to the level that the game tells me to take, and I can take that feat. Boom. That's it. That's the big earn that I had to do for it. Vin is pretty much locked. That is sweet. I'm excited, buddy. Right. No world-ending disasters. That's great. GM Scott, hello. I did see you making fun of me for referencing Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but yes, we are here. You heard that as aberrant lavatory? Laboratory. I'll say it that way. Laboratory. Hey, Paladin Actual. Welcome. Need to support the champion video? It's in the name. Carry on, carry on. Hey, listen, the Paladins supporting the Paladins. It's like a form of union fun. Love it. Awesome. I think it'd be cool to talk about the Paladin and how that entered into the game and sort of the place that the champion holds now. It's actually one of my favorite classes from 3rd edition, and Pathfinder 1 is the Paladin. I loved it in 2nd edition as well. But I loved it in 4th edition as well, too, actually, now that I think about it. But the champion in Pathfinder 2nd edition, I don't know. I'm a little torn on that one. Let's see. Now, again, we're getting kind of off on the beaten path here, but Gargs brings up an interesting point because, we talked about this when we talked about the fighter stream and how one of the original advantages of being a fighter in OD&D was just that they could use all weapons. And that alone was such a huge win. Because when you found a magical item, it meant that if it was a magical weapon, the fighter could use it. So it's like they had the biggest bite at the apple for getting a cool magic weapon. If you found if you're a cleric, it was like, well, if it's not one of the 5 items, magical weapons that I can use, then it's no good to me. And if you're a wizard or a, thief, there are a very limited number of weapons you could use. But if you found a warhammer, a flail, a trident, you were like, sick, I'm a fighter, I can use that. And I know I don't know where this fantasy changed, but I can definitely say that for me, part of the thing I loved about growing up playing D&D was the idea that like characters just, they changed their weapons. They the fighter starts off with the longsword and then they go into the dungeon and they find a really cool magical hammer and they go, I guess I use hammers now. And it wasn't until you got to 3rd edition where they introduced weapon focus and weapon specialization that suddenly made it where you're like, well, I don't want to use one of these other magical items because my character is specialized into using a certain sword. And if I use some different weapon, I'm not getting maximum benefit out of that. And that was a real problem.
Tip $3, just dropping in for a second before going back to raid prep. Thanks for all the awesome stuff you're doing.
Thank you, Strat. Appreciated it. Ford. I was talking about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy earlier. Ford is here with their first super chat. Ford Prefect, thank you so much for your incredible super chat. Appreciate it so much. Gotta head out.
Sarah,
hey,
$5. Loving this talk. Would be great to see you put your DM resource books in action in a world building stream.
Thank you for the support, Gossamer. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing some cool stuff with not just you all, but with our patrons as well. Definitely want to get more into that. Hey, Jason's here.
Jason B tipped $10. Excuse me, sir. The only site that should be in PF2 is the train station you start all of our APs at. And trust me, we got trains for days. Our troll train conductors wear suits and have tragic backstories that only the GM knows about.
Those are the best ones. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a tip train. I guess keep it going. Hype train is real. Jason, the things that you come up with are they're just on another level, I guess, buddy. It's going to be really awkward is like I'm going to be at Gen Con next week and this is like a side note here, but it's like we're nobody, we're a small group. Not many people know us, but I have to wonder, or at least think that some people at Paizo know who we are. And I'm going to be there and probably at least 1 or 2 of the days I'm going to be wearing my Knights of Last Call shirt. And I'm going to have to go up. I'm going to the Paizo booth. I want to get my Rage of Elements hardcover book. I might as well get it at Gen Con. I wonder if that interaction is how that interaction is going to go. So it remains to be seen. Right. Meanwhile, in Northern Reaches, Bob, you all get a second reaction for killing this raid boss. And, I don't want to steal any of Bob's thunder here, but that was literally from, that was my suggestion. That was what I wanted to get a reward for.
Shadram tipped $25. World building series? Heck yes.
Nice. Thank you, Shadram. That is extremely generous of you. Appreciate it. Oh, God.
Jason B tipped $5. Hey, stop by our booth when you are there. We will offer you free shit that you can turn down.
As Lance Quagmire just said, just let me buy the book. Listen, I don't need free stuff. Can I just buy this book, please? I'd like to go, please. But thank you very much for that, Jason. And thank you very much for that $25 tip, Shadram. That is very, very generous of you. And again, I think a world building series would be really, really fun. We could kind of figure it out with the patrons, like what's the best way to go through it. Because like I can see the pro and con of like me just doing it and you guys just kind of getting to watch, but also it'd be kind of fun to involve the chat as well. But that might slow it down a little bit. So, hey, 3 people recognize you at Origins. That means that mathematically 0.45 people should recognize you at Gen Con. That's so true.
GM Scott tipped $25.
Oh, GM Scott.
World building is Tabi Zero Miz.
Thank you very, very, very much. I liked that. Te Zero Bomb is how that one got pronounced. Thank you for the support, GM Scott. By the way, I'm just gonna bring your shirt. So I decided because I think Ryan is also going to be at Gen Con and he has a shirt coming to him. So I'm just gonna bring a couple shirts and we'll meet up and I'll give you guys your shirts at Gen Con. Thank you so much for that support and for saving me several dollars of shipping. How convenient. All right, I want to get through some of this stuff here. Let's see. Northern Reaches Season 2 is doing this in a bunch of sites with site boons. I'm so happy that we're ending up getting semi-diegetic progression. Right. Meaning diegetic means in the world. In other words, the world is giving you the game, or the world is giving you the reward, not the game. And I think that's really, really, really important. Let's see what else we got here. Commodifying, commodifying. I don't know what the right. I think it's commoditizing actually. Commoditizing magic items also kills the wonder of spellcasters, to a certain degree. I mean, magic items were the way that like let the fighters and the rogues and other non-spellcaster classes, kind of get their chance to be really cool and wonderful as well. And I guess in a certain way, yeah, it, makes it so that when the magic item is just something you can get on tap, the wizard's ability to suddenly produce magic doesn't seem quite so powerful, right? Melissa says it was one thing I hoped they would have changed in the treasure vault. And then I was like, well, all these suck. They didn't suck. Some of them sucked. They were just balanced. They were just fine. It's like when you get a meal at a restaurant and you go, I mean, it's food. I get to eat. I'm not upset. It's not a bad meal, but I'm sad that it's not good. And even though it's totally acceptable, it's almost ruining the experience because I was really excited for something big, right? So, all right. So, number one is magic items. Number two is treasure. And we already talked about this a little bit, but treasure in old school D&D meant experience points. Okay, because sure, your character wanted magic items, but you also wanted to gain levels. Why did you want to gain levels? Well, because that gave you more hit points. It gave you it didn't give you cool new feats or cool new abilities, but hey, getting more hit points and better saving throws was going to allow you a better shot at surviving those greater challenges, which means that you had a better chance of getting cooler magical items. And so finding treasure, getting experience points was a big driving part of exploration. Well, if you're using milestone-based experience points where you are rewarding specific triggered actions, then you have removed the experience point gain component from your game, from your exploration, from your site-based adventure. One of the reasons why site-based adventures worked so well is in old school D&D is because you might have a variety of rooms and chambers, any one of which could contain a deadly or dangerous or lethal trap or creature or monster, right? And all the more reason for there being, cautious and to kind of keep your head down, right? But you wanted to find that gold. You wanted to find that EXP. And there was a part of you that, like, look, we'll get to the real reason why we have this problem here in a second, but like, your time was limited. You only had so many resources. You had to make the most of it. And, this idea of, I want to clear the dungeon out. I want to explore every single room and get every single bit of treasure in this dungeon. That's perfect. That's ideal. Of course, that's what you want to do, but you can't do it. You can't do it because it's too hard. The game doesn't really allow you to do that. And so you kind of have to pick and choose your battles. But what that means is you're like, look, I can't get every bit of treasure in this dungeon, but I want to. And at the very least, I should be able to find the really big treasures, you know, the big honking chest of gold that is just overflowing with jewels and gems and gold. If I miss the pouch of copper coins, I'm okay with that. So the experience points became part of that motivation. But if I gave you this same map and I said, when you beat the ogre at the, or the dragon or the whatever, at the end of this, and you save the day and the town is saved, then you will, everyone's going to get +1 level. You're going to level up. What I have done is I have removed all incentive to explore, because now exploring isn't going to generate any additional benefits for you. And in fact, if anything, it's going to hurt your chances of leveling up, because what you want to do is get to the ogre in the quickest and shortest and most effective, efficient way possible. I mean, if you could, you might say, yeah, I mean, if we could figure out a way to skip the whole dungeon and just, you know, surreptitiously go right to the ogre and kill it with, you know, all of our spell slots and all of our magical items available to us and all of our, you know, conditions at you know, the best possible state that we could be in. That is what you would do. And that would give you a level up. And to be clear, that itself is not a bad idea, but that's a very different type of game, because when you create that kind of incentive, you're creating more of a stealth operative type game, right? You're creating a game that's more like Metal Gear Solid for video game. It's one of the video games I have played, right? It's a stealth game. It's not about, and to be clear, most of these games are about, you know, a certain degree of heroic fantasy. Now, that type of approach may not be what you, or even really your players, want. So, like, you need to think about why certain things aren't being incentivized. I'll give you a great example. When the first time, and I'll come clean with you. I'll be honest with you all. When we first played Abomination Vaults, okay, this was over Foundry. Okay, so this is the first time. I'm not going to give too many spoilers away here, but the Abomination Vaults has sort of a room on each level that is sort of tied to the gauntlet. And it's usually a circular room, okay? And it's kind of got like a beam of energy that kind of comes from the depths up all the way to the surface where the tower is, okay? I drew this on its side, okay? Anyways, what I did in my game was anytime the players found one of these runes, they could bind their energy with that of the gauntlet, and they would gain new special abilities, magical, supernatural abilities, bonus focus spells, and crazy, powerful abilities. You know, like they could turn themselves into ghost touch energy, or they could, you know, it was designed to give them cool weapons that they could use against the sort of threats that were in the Abomination Vault. Now, to be clear, they didn't have to do this, but knowing that each level had one of these chambers, that became part of their goal as a group. We should find it. We should find the cool spirit chamber and get a cool new ability. And it was worked really, really well until we got to like level 4. And by this point in time, the players all had 3 of these special abilities, and they probably had the 4th one actually. And by the time they had this, the Pathfinder 2 math, of which I was relying on, the, you know, the Abomination Vaults as written in the book, you know, kind of started to fall apart, because it could not stand up to that much broken powers. And so the game, you know, it came to a conclusion after we beat the first book, which is levels 1 through 4. But now we've gone back to it the second time around, and now we're playing the second book, and we've kind of retconned, right? Everybody kind of got to make sort of, we assumed that like this was a continuation of the first party, but it was like months later and it was a new party and no one knew what happened to the first party. But I got rid of these special benefits. And why did I do that? Because it was breaking the game, and I wanted to be lazy, and I wanted to just use Abomination Vaults as written. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially since it's our backup game for when our buddy Kaz can't make it to our Friday Legend of the Five Rings game. The last thing I really want to do is be spending a ton of time reworking it. But I have noticed that without these special rooms, the group is much less focused in where they're going, what they're doing. They kind of sometimes feel like they are just wandering around the space because there's nothing that's really incentivizing them or driving them towards any one particular goal. And that is what it comes down to. Your group, in order to enjoy, in order for site-based adventures to be successful, your group needs to have goals. They need to have things, treasure, boons, experience points. They need to have something that they want that is going to make them go look for it. Because if you don't have those things in place, then people are just going to wander around aimlessly. And exploration doesn't really have much of a point. This is part of the reason I have, there's a certain extent where it's like, yeah, you can just kind of go and explore and see what happens. But in my experience for many, many years, one of the reasons why hex crawls, when I used to run them back in the day, would always fail is because I was running them horribly. Because I would just sit down with like a blank sheet of, hex paper, and I would go wherever you want. There could be anything. And the players are like, yeah, but what else is out there? You have to explore to find out. And they're like, we have no idea. I guess we had this hex. Oh, okay. Well, there's something in this hex. And you're like, okay, is that cool or not? Like, I don't even know. Now I understand that it's really important for the players to have these sort of goals or things that they want to find before you even begin that sort of hexploration, because there needs to be something that is sort of driving them. You want to have them, we want to go find the lost city of gold, but I also would love to go find this special master who can train us in the way of awesome reactions. But I also want to, deal with this goblin problem before it gets out of hand and maybe destroys the town, right? There's a lot of competing, sort of goals, and it pushes and pulls you. And this was where we get to the ultimate issue between OSR and Pathfinder 2. Because we've been talking about the rewards, but what we haven't really been focusing on is the downside. The reason why site-based design works so well in an exploration in particular, in an old school Renaissance game, is because in OSR, okay, when you're exploring, it's costing you, okay? It's costing you hit points. It's costing you torches. It's costing you food, water, okay? It's costing you in everything from, diseases and poisons. And quite frankly, it could also, it could just kill you. It's costing you in deaths. Maybe not of you, maybe of your henchmen or your hirelings. The point is, you have a meter, okay, in these games, and the longer you explore, okay, the more that meter starts to go to the red. And exploring is great because the more you explore, the more treasure you're going to find and more experience you're going to get and the more magical items you're going to get. But eventually, curiosity kills the cat, and you have to just make a decision about whether or not we should proceed and we should go forward because we've run out of resources. And it's that tension between wanting to explore everything so that we can get everything, but we only have so much fuel in the tank that sort of provides that key back and forth. Pathfinder 2nd Edition really does a good job of eliminating most of these concerns. And in my personal opinion, that is what makes it super, super challenging too. Rules as written, use Pathfinder 2nd Edition to do site-based design. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't do it. Of course you can. but you're going to have to work a little harder than you might otherwise. So let's see what chat is saying here. Question: what really stops you from awarding feats? I think skill feats in generals are fairly blah to take, but not bad if you get it for free. And yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. Nothing's stopping you from doing anything, Melissa. And in fact, feats have a certain amount of diminishing returns, right? Because a character only has so many actions in a turn. I mean, let me put it this way. What makes let's say Barbarian has a whirlwind strike. What makes that a level 12 feat, right? Couldn't a Barbarian have that at level 4, right? It's not like it's broken. You know, your ability to attack multiple people is tied to your attack bonus. So it's not like you can suddenly start killing demons and devils because you got whirlwind attack at level 4 instead of level 12. But the fact of the matter is, at a certain component, because I mean, we always argue, Aaron and I, that you don't really even need feats in Pathfinder 2nd Edition to beat the game. So I think awarding feats is a fantastic idea, but I also totally understand that is, just like free archetype, it is a balance change. I mean, that's one way to think about it. You're going to give your players free archetype. Anyways, don't give them free archetype. Instead, and not at some sort of regular progression. Don't give it to them every 2 levels. Just in your back of your mind, go, look, I was prepared to play this campaign with free archetype. So I was prepared to give these characters 10 extra feats over the course of 20 levels. Instead, I'm not going to give them to them. They can earn them. And not earn the free archetype. No. I mean, like, you could just give them feats that are appropriate to whatever it is that they just did in the fiction. Right? Does that make sense? Like, the characters go in and they fight a vampire lord and they defeat him, and the vampire lord's, essence sort of explodes as they defeat it, and there's like a blinding flash of light, and, you give every character the, I don't know, some feat from the Ghost Hunter archetype, and everybody gets it, or some of the people get it that were there. And they didn't take the Ghost Hunter archetype. They just randomly have this level 7 or level 8 Ghost Hunter feat because we killed that vampire and it was awesome. And if we didn't kill that vampire, it's not like the GM would have been like, well, you're due for a free archetype feat, so I need to give you one. No, you just, we call it diegetic progression, right? Whatever makes sense, give it to it. Because one of the complaints, I'm going off on a rant here, one of the complaints that I have made about the game is, I had a really hard time in Aaron's campaign, his two campaigns ago, Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I made a character, a fighter, and I wanted to make a, one-handed fighter, who could use his offhand to like do cool stuff and grab people and punch people, like, kind of more of like a pulp action kind of fighter. Really cool character, really liked it. He died at level 2. And I was sitting there going like, oh, okay, I got to make a new character. And I was like, well, I only got to level 2. I still want to play that character. Aaron is letting me make a new character. I could just make that exact same character. Same exact stats, same exact feats, same exact skills. I could just make that character straight up. And you know what? I could have been level 6 and level 8 and died. And Aaron could have said, hey, I'm sorry your fighter died. You can make a new level 8 fighter or a new level 8 character. I could be like, cool. I'm going to make a level 8 fighter with the exact same feats and skills that I took last time. And, I get a stipend of GP to buy magical items with because the game says I need to have them. So I'm just going to buy the same magical items I had before. And when I realized that, I got stuck. I mean, we stopped playing for like weeks because I was like, I don't know what I want to play, because that's what I want to play a fighter, but I couldn't bring myself to just make the same character again. I ended up making a Magus who immediately died his first session to a River Drake, which is a broken monster. And that's what led to Dark of Winter, where we got rid of death because that was a problem for me. But anyways, my point is, these diegetic progressions, gaining feats, not because you gained level 2 or level 4 or level 6, but because you did something in the game means that if I gained that cool feat for killing the vampire and I got some awesome ability to, some other feat because I fought the giants, if my character dies, even if the GM says, you can go ahead and make a new character, level 8, my character won't have those feats. And the GM's not going to say like, oh, here, just pick 3 or 4 feats of whatever you want. No, that's not how feats work in our game, or at least those bonus feats. You have to earn them. You have to be there. You have to do the thing. And that seems awesome to me, but a lot of groups would have problems with that because you might say, well, wait, so are the characters who were there from the beginning, aren't they going to be stronger? Aren't they going to have a couple extra feats? And the answer to which I say is yes, if you really think that is, something that is meaningfully different for your characters. But I mean, Pathfinder 2nd Edition does a pretty good job, I think, of making the number of feats you have not be really material. So yeah, I think that you could totally do that. And I think that would actually be a good solution to trying to make site-based adventure design fun and interesting in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Because right now, there's not, especially if you use milestone-based experience, there really is no reason to explore anything. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, we're talking about Catfall. Let's see here. Nowadays, I'm going in a different direction, similar to you. I'm starting to let players just create custom abilities and upgrade them. I just have a GM side balance rule set that lets me vet them. Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad idea either. So the 2 goals that I've seen drive PCs the most have been get stronger and find the truth. Yeah, and, we talked about boons and banes. I think that, information, lore, right? We talked about magical items, treasure, lore, info. It could be information that your group wants to know because it gives them a sizable tactical advantage. It could also just be a cool part of your game's lore. As players, that is a worthy reward sometimes. Just learning more about the GM's world, especially now if that lore can actually become like useful information, right? If you can turn that information into some sort of, better action that you take in the future, then that's chef's kiss. That's double bonus. So I think that's really, really great too. All right. Self-confessed regarding custom abilities. Oh, I was talking to Strat, not you. All right. Well, that's unfortunate. Aftermath feats seem kind of close to that. Yeah, I agree. I think they do. So, all right. Well, let's see. We've got half an hour and change left. We're doing pretty good on everything. So if you have questions, let me know. Like what elements of site-based design do you struggle with? I know we had the patrons vote and like they said, like, well, we'd rather talk philosophical, because, a lot of the things that we've talked about before, and I don't want to rehash over and over again, apply to my site-based design as well. Like, I want it to, a good adventure should challenge the PCs and the players, right? I want to challenge Bob and Aaron, characters, but I also want to challenge Bob and Aaron. I actually think the very best adventures in the game sort of target both characters. Now, how do I challenge the PCs? Simple. Mechanics. All right? This is where you use combats. This is where you use skill checks, right? A challenge to the PC is, does my character that I've built or that I'm playing have the right mechanics or the right abilities or a high enough bonus to get past this? When you challenge the players, it's a non-mechanical challenge. And believe it or not, this is something that I think a lot of people have a problem with, which is that, nowadays our mechanics cover so many bases that it can be difficult. Like, for example, I'll give you a great example. Finding secret doors or hidden treasure in an old school game was really more of challenging the players. Where do you look? How do you look? Oh, are you examining the door? Are you knocking it with your hilt of your sword to listen for a hollow spot? Well, I know they won't find the secret door because it's located several feet up, it's above them. It's near the ceiling. And then someone's like, well, I'm going to pull out my pole and I'm going to start tapping around all over the wall, not just its ground. And it's like, oh, well, as you get higher up, you hear a slight hollow sound and the players go, oh, cool, I found a secret door. Nowadays, we have perception checks. So a lot of what the mechanics have done is, in some ways, sucked out some of the players' skill from these adventures. And it's one of the reasons why sometimes I feel like what's interesting, though, is what they've left, and it creates an illusion of player challenge. What they've left behind is FBT opportunities. Now, listen, we call it fluffy bullshit time, but that doesn't mean that we don't love fluffy bullshit time. We were just playing Root Tuesday. You saw a lot of fluffy bullshit time. Me and the other characters just kind of chewing the scenery, throwing funny one-liners at each other and sort of seeing how they react. That's fun. That is totally fun. But don't kid yourself into thinking that that is some sort of challenge. It's not. And so, part of the responsibility of the game master is to sort of, if you want to create a good adventure, is you need to find a way to meaningfully challenge the players. And in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, that could be kind of challenging sometimes. Chadram says, treasure and magic items is the carrot approach to encouraging exploration. Does the stick approach of fronts, etc. work too, or do players feel railroaded then? Yes, it's a great point. And I would say this, they won't unless you make it existential, right? If you make it, oh, well, if you don't do this thing, then the entire world will be destroyed. You're not really giving them much of a choice. If you make it so that, like, oh, the town that you really, really care about will be destroyed, you're not really making it too much of a choice. Of course they're going to do it. You need to find a balance. Now, that doesn't mean that, look, if the fiction takes you there, you should follow the fiction. But if you're looking for a way to sort of incentivize them without forcing them to go down a path, make it something that they would like, if you gave them a choice and it cost them nothing, they would say, no, I don't want that to happen. But if it did happen, they wouldn't be like, well, the game is over, or I'm really, really upset. You want it to be something that, like, hurts them but doesn't destroy them. That sort of, like maybe a town that they passed through once gets destroyed. And they're like, whoa, we like that town, but we don't really care, like, deeply about it. I'm not saying that you can't throw their favorite things into crosshairs and, try to take them out. I'm just saying, realize that if you are doing that with the knowledge that the players will react, you are essentially creating a railroad. On the other hand, if you give them a big stick and you give them a big carrot at the same time, now you get to see, you're asking them, remember I always said this, why do I GM? I want to know, I want to ask questions. I want to ask my players questions, right? I don't even know where I put that. There we go. Ask players questions. Hey, you know how you've been really trying to get this amazing, incredible magical item? Rumors have finally appeared that, the magical item has appeared and many people are off to get it. Also, your hometown is under threat of invasion. And I love to be like, all right, which one do you pick? And there's a lot of, I think, modern players who might go like, I want both, right? Like, why can't I have both? A buddy of mine was recently bitching because he was playing some video game. Maybe it's an old video game, but like he was bitching to me about it, about like how he hated it because there got to a point in the game where you had to choose. He's like, I don't want to choose. If I put in enough time and effort, I want to win everything. And I want to get every item. I want to get every unlock, and I want to have everything. And I was like, yeah, I don't feel the same way, but yeah. Vin says, I agree that site-based is much harder in PF2E than other systems, older systems. I've actually had it work in social settings, towns, just fine. But in general exploration, mixed results. Have you seen Wolves Upon the Coast? Characters have to find in the world the knowledge of how to cast each spell, and then further they have to find the spell components as well. No, I have not seen that. That sounds pretty sweet. What I struggle with is how to keep making content to fill a large site and have it feel cohesive and have cross-sectional impact and payoffs. Well, that is a great question, Strat. And I think the answer there is to think in terms of like sort of themes or ideas. Like, we've talked before about like factions, but that's just like one theme, right? Like you could also have, let me try to think of like, and again, it's all about cohesiveness, right? So I'm going to use an example of something that I did in Dragon's Delve, which is sort of like a, how can I describe it? It's like a thematically tied items. So like or even I should say rooms. And as an example, in Dragon's Delve, there was this group that had come to Dragon's Delve many years ago called the Mages 4 powerful mages who sought to make Dragon's Delve into their own sort of personal domain and explore its secrets for themselves. So one of the themes that they would find as they went through, all the levels of the dungeon, from level 1 down to level 2, down to level 3, off to sub level 3A, off to, level 4 is, every level or two, they would find rooms or signs or passages of these Mages 4. The Mages 4 they weren't in the game. They had been dead for many, many, many hundreds of years. But like their magical items, their personal chambers were scattered throughout the dungeon. And to be honest with you, it didn't make any difference what was in those rooms. I mean, it's cool to try to tie them together. The way that I made it tie together and made it feel cohesive was because they were like, oh, they got to learn who the Mages 4 were. They got to learn about Cavil the Conjurer, and they learned about Lysandra, the Enchanter. And they would find something and go, oh, this is definitely Lysandra's work, and that's a really rewarding experience as a GM and as a player. Yes, Lance Quagmire, there was Folian, who they nicknamed Time Elf, because he eventually learned how to travel through time and space, and everybody was, except for me, was a big Doctor Who fan. So they were like, oh, he's like Doctor Who. I was like, I guess. And so when the players kind of felt that progression, it made it really, really fun. And I should even say to the point where it's like, Tim's character at one point got a mithril glove that was charged with electricity, and he could do it to use various electricity things. But what made it cool, or and for him anyways, was that it was Lysandra's mithril glove. And that name didn't mean, now they got that, deeper down into the dungeon. So when he first got Lysandra's mithril glove, that name wasn't the first time he was hearing it. He had heard about Lysandra all the way back up on level 1. And so just simply putting her name into the item reward made the whole dungeon feel remarkably connected. Because, if he hadn't been there, if I had just given him Lysandra's mithril glove, then he might not have known he would be like, oh, I don't know anything about this. But because I played the game and I know who this person is, I have some additional information. And again, it's like a free win, but it's kind of like using the themes to tie that stuff together. And Gossamer had a question, what should I be thinking about when figuring out how multiple factions interact in a site-based adventure? I mean, the answer there, Gossamer, is what are their motivations, or goals, and, what are their capabilities? Because that is the key, I think part of the problem with a lot of people is, Dungeon World calls these, you need to have a front. And a lot of people will put factions into their group, or into their dungeons, but it's like, okay, but what do those factions actually want here? What are they trying to do? A lot of times it's just like, oh, they're a bunch of, orcs and ogres hanging out. And to be fair, sometimes that is the case. Their motivation is, we want a place to live. It's not always the most compelling of motivations. So you need to be willing to give people a motivation that ties into the site. Because when you put a faction into a site, unless they're living there, which is a possibility, they're trying to explore it too, right? They're trying to figure out something about the dungeon. They're trying to get some sort of reward from the dungeon, right? And so that creates the sort of tension that you're going to be able to sort of build off of with the faction. You really need to always be thinking about it in terms of, what does this NPC want? What do they want to do with this site? How do they intend to make use of it? Because, when we talk about like time-based adventures, and, a lot of APs are time-based adventures, right? Event-based adventures, I think they're usually called. Thursday morning, Thursday night, Friday morning, right? You guys know the kind of adventure, right? Thursday morning, the orcs attack. At Thursday night, the dragon comes to town. And Friday morning, the reinforcements arrive. The problem here is it doesn't really give the players a lot of time to sort of let the situation breathe, right? Because these are very existential threats, right? Like, you have to deal with this now, or you can't deal with it later because it will have already happened. With site-based adventures, you need to lean into the fact, a lot of people talk about time. Even Tome of Adventure Design, a book I love, talks about, the importance of the race against time. I think that is bad advice to a certain extent. I think they got confused with the fact that in the old school game, time was an issue, but it wasn't because time itself was the issue. It's because time meant random encounters. Time meant torches running out, right? Time meant food and water running low. Time itself wasn't a problem. It was these depleting resources that were linked to time. Nowadays, in order to sort of create artificial tension, people will put into their thing, okay, well, they have to rescue the princess in 3 days, or she gets sacrificed. And to be fair, you could do that. That's not always the wrong choice. But what's much more interesting is to have a sense of, okay, I've got this faction. I've got this group of, dwarven miners. Okay. And they're not good, but they're not evil either. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to, uncover the lost gemstone of, Akabeth or something. And so I go, well, you know what? I know that if left to their own devices, in a couple of weeks, they will, break into the lower caves. And, a few weeks after that, plus 1 week or 2 weeks after that, they will find the stone, but they awaken the Balrog, or whatever the Balrog equivalent is. And they're forced to flee before they can recover the stone. And now they want to go back and they want to figure out how they can get the stone, but also avoid the Balrog. But keep in mind, this is them. This is like their little mini game. How the PCs interact with this is completely different. But the key thing here is none of these things, even the awakening of the Balrog, is necessarily the end of the adventure for the PCs. It just changes the dynamics of the location. Vin says, the best results I had for site-based in Pathfinder 2nd Edition was when there was a combination of plot and loot-based rewards plus cool, interesting setting to see all in one, which is a lot of work to do as a GM. Amen. It really is. Michael says, PC challenge is beating the River Drake. Player challenge is knowing that wading into the chest-deep water to do so is a bad idea. That is totally reasonable. And to be fair, one of the reasons why combat is so popular, people think, well, maybe they're right, but people think it's because they like the cool fighting and fighting is cool. No, the reason why combat is so popular and skill checks are not is, and to a certain extent, as neither is fluffy bullshit time, is because combat kind of automatically challenges the PC and the player, right? We all know this, right? As much as your PC is the medium that you're using to engage in that combat, it is you, the player or the players, who are being challenged, right? What feats to use, what spells to cast, where to move, where to position, which threats to engage, right? None of that's really being decided by your PC. It's being decided by you and your fellow players. But at the same time, it's also a definite challenge for your party, for your PC. Do they have enough hit points, armor class, attack bonus? It gives you a lot of choices and it tests your PC. So that's why combat can be so rewarding and fun, and why a lot of people end up doing it a lot is because they go, it's not that they're like bloodthirsty or they're murder hobos. They just go, the other parts of this game don't feel as satisfying, and that there's a reason for that. It's because those other parts of the game might not be doing a good job of challenging a PC and the player. Isaiah says, and it gives players meaningful choices with consequences, whereas picking a lock does not. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. The princess gets sacrificed in 3 days is the end of some cult's plan. There should be a reason to it, and generally stages and before and escalation. 100% agree, Strat. Because, the key with any adventure is, what if the PC, right? A lot of people write that and then they go, and, even Paizo will write in their adventure paths, after the PCs stop the sacrifice of the princess, they uncover a note which leads them to the cult's secret base, located a week's journey away in the Dawn's Edge Mountain. After traveling there, the players will encounter a dissident of the cult who's been expelled for being against their murderous ways. After welcoming this cultist into their group, he will betray them. Everything is just pre-planned and written out. It's not great. If you go, hey, they're trying to sacrifice this princess so that they can get her blood, which they can use to awaken some ancient ritual, which will turn them all into, I don't know, half dragon demon people with, awesome powers. Okay, cool. So we know where this goes next, and how we can proceed from there. Yes, I found this letter, you guys. It's titled The Plot. There's a lot of letters at the end of these Paizo adventures. I'll tell you that. Let's see here. Do I like Gumshoe's approach to investigation spends to influence the narrative? Info given freely if the players ask or inquire about something. No check made. Not really, but I'm the wrong person to ask about that, Ryan, because I don't really like mysteries. I like investigation. I like, I like exploration, I should say. And a lot of people go, exploration is investigation. I think it's a little different. I'm not really so interested in solving a mystery. And there's certainly something to be said about those games where a mystery fundamentally is something that's going to challenge the player. But Gumshoe says, well, look, our game is about solving mysteries, and we have to accommodate the fact that the player themselves might be horrible at doing mysteries. The classic example is a puzzle, right? Now, in Dragon's Delve, I used puzzles all the time. In fact, one of the things that I did in Dragon's Delve, which was my multiple level mega dungeon, was, many years ago, part of the history of the lore, Jumantic, I think I took it from Jumanji, who was a bard, came to Dragon's Delve to sort of leave his mark on the dungeon. And he put on every level 1, level 2, level 3, a puzzle. And it was like, a actual, like, I would hand the players a puzzle. You know, like, it might have been a physical puzzle. It might have been a written puzzle. It might have been something I drew. Might be something I got from the internet. It was like a puzzle. And to be 100% clear, this was very much aimed at challenging the PCs. Sorry, the players. There was no int check allowed to. Nope. This was just me giving players who like puzzles something cool to do. But here's the key thing, and I can't stress this enough. At no point were any of these even close to being required. They were all 100% optional. If the players encountered a puzzle and they couldn't solve it, it did not stop anything from proceeding or going forward. They just maybe missed out on a cool magic item or a cool piece of lore. They didn't necessarily need to get any of these. And there were definitely times where a puzzle stumped them and, you know, they would say, hey, can I use some of my PC's abilities to try to solve this puzzle? And to a certain extent, I would allow that. But, you know, like spells or, any of those things. But like, I definitely don't want people just to make a spell check or a skill check and solve the puzzle. Now, some people will say that. They're like, well, my character is really good at solving puzzles. They have a high int. And I understand that logic and reasoning. But I also feel that when you want to do exploration, there is some things that you just have to leave to the players, because otherwise the game is just going to be one big skill check after another. Ooh, I like Mike's approach here. Twist or moral conundrum. The cult is actually trying to prevent the apocalypse, which will happen unless the princess is sacrificed. Yeah, squeeze them. If you want to squeeze them really hard as well. Take care, Isaiah. My favorite is PFS mods. Half of the mod is exposition the players will never get. It's like they pack a short story for the GM just so they can enjoy some night light reading. That is actually very accurate. I think a lot of APs are written specifically to be enjoyable to read, even if it will make no difference to the actual final product. One D&D YouTuber I listen to says that adventure paths are mostly for inspiring content. I exaggerate a little bit, but it makes me wish if venture paths were really just strategic content for GMs. But it makes me wish adventure paths were really just strategic content for GMs. Well, to be clear, Dan, that's kind of what before adventure paths got created, that is kind of what modules were. Modules were just interesting sites that you would buy from the book, from the store that somebody else had written for you, filled it with lots of cool monsters and treasure and cool encounters and fun locations. But it was, it wasn't part of some sort of epic unfolding story or plot. It was just a cool location. And that really made it, to your point, kind of strategic content for GMs. A bard who etches a word search into a door on each level of the dungeon. Putting that in my bad NPC ideas folder for later. No, it's fine, And I should also note, by the way, that my players eventually learned, there's one of these puzzles on every level. And now it became part of their things to want to find and explore and look for on each level. They would get to a new level and they would go, man, all right, wow, we finally got to it. Level 5, man, okay, there's so much we need to do here. All right, we know about this particular level that there is supposed to be this awesome magical device that can enhance our ability scores. So we definitely want to find that. But we also know that there's going to be another puzzle from Jumantic. And so far we're 4 for 4. So we definitely want to find that because the magic items have been really, really good. And so we need to find that. But also we learned that this level has a CR12 horrific monster that roams the path. So that's like an anti-exploration. We want to make sure we avoid that. And already the players now have their threats, their challenges, their opportunities available to them, and they can start formulating plans and they can start thinking of different approaches. And that's what makes the exploration process so fun, is they get to pick where they're going, and it's all about the rewards, or I should say, it's either about gaining positive rewards or avoiding negative consequences. So sort of the stick and the carrot. I'm getting Sword of the Serpentine at Gen Con. It'll be my first gumshoe. I do like that it gives players insight and deduction to find the information and not always rely on a check. Forbidden Lands, modules, or adventure paths sound like they are where we want adventure paths to be. I mean, to be fair, a lot of people really like Adventure Path, and I don't think there's anything wrong with you if you like Adventure Path. I mean, it's totally fine. I just don't feel like Adventure Paths, even if it says it includes a quote unquote dungeon, I don't really feel like, I think just because something is underground and has passages and rooms doesn't make it a dungeon. I think the reason dungeons are fun is because you get to explore them. And that's what really adds to the experience. And a lot of adventure paths are not about exploration. You know, they are essentially just a series of encounters before you get to the next critical milestone in that adventure path. Yes, they are also far too small. Far too small. All right. I don't know if anybody else asked a question, but I know I've tried to answer a couple different questions. I mean, you know, again, I think you just need to think in terms of like what is going to motivate my players. And, you know, just like a good adventure should challenge the player and the PC, I think a good adventure should also reward the player and the PC, you know? And that's also really, really, really important because you want to be able to say, hey, look, how do you reward the player? Well, they had fun. That's usually the way you reward the player. How do you reward the PC? Cool shit. You know, new abilities, better bonuses, you know, gold, treasure, magical items, new skills. You know, those are all the things that you need the most of. Let's see. Have you talked about melon diagrams yet? If you mean like drawing out the lines of the dungeon, well, people said they in the chat in the Patreon voting, they said they didn't really want to talk about like drawing and design elements from that perspective. So I didn't really get into it today. No. But I know that there was one about like, you know, all right, well, whatever. Strat brought it up. So like, for example, the classic example is Sunless Citadel, which I'm going to do from memory here, which is a 3rd edition adventure. So you've got the stairs that lead up, and then it comes into a room. And then off of that room, there is like a hidden chamber that leads to a troll. And then from here, you can go into the kobold room. But you could also go north, which leads into a bunch of dire rats. And then there's a bunch of chambers off of here, but they all just kind of lead back to the kobold room. And then this goes here, which leads to the goblin area. And this also leads to the dire rats. And then the goblin area leads to the stairs down. And this looks like there's a ton of options and choices. But the fact of the matter is, if you were to really draw this, it would look like this. You can go straight. Here's the entrance. Here's the stairs down. Actually, I lied. This does not go here. It goes here. So you can go to the troll encounter, and this is the stairs down to level 2. You can do the troll encounter if you want. And then here you can either go to the kobolds or you can go to directly to the goblins, but either way the kobolds leads to the goblins, and then that leads to the stairs. So you can see how this is really just a straight linear path, right? The entrance leads to the stairs. You can optionally go and fight the kobolds, and then you have to deal with the goblins regardless, and then you're at the stairs. So there's no loops. The key thing in making a dungeon design is you want there to be loops that lead to different locations. This is written in such a way that going this way doesn't really make any sort of difference in the grand scheme of the dungeon. You're going to have to go to the goblins one way or the other. So this idea of jacqueing the dungeon is the idea of creating. When you look at the dungeon diagram, you shouldn't be able to tell where it's going. It should just be an interesting site and location. Anyways, so that is what I think you're talking about. Lollipop. What are some ways to come up with compelling powers and feats as rewards for players in a system like PF2E. Well, it could be easy to overdo it. I wonder if I can bring up my Foundry. Let me see. Loading, please wait. Let me bring up my Forge. And we'll see. Now, again, did it, quote unquote, break the game? Yes, maybe. But did we have fun with it? Sure. Maybe. Hold on a sec here. Let me log in. We have a bunch of, we have like 3 or 4 different Forge accounts because, Northern Reaches and all that. Oh, here we go. All right. All right. It's gotta upgrade really quick here. Let's see here. Dan says, Chadram is totally planning to use it. Okay, I must have missed that here. Just ask Pumpkin. Yes. Pumpkin did break their game. All right. I'm curious if this is even going to work. Maybe. The solution, Tarask Feats. Exactly. Damn. Oh, there we go. It's just taking a while to load. What is going on here? Okay. Apparently, I forgot my password for my own Forge server. Damn. That sucks. I don't know how I actually fixed that. Anyways, I was going to show you some of the cool powers and abilities that I made for my Abomination Vaults campaign. I mean, yeah, I think the key is to sort of tie that into the theme of it, Lollipop. Like, it could be very tempting to be like I'll give you a great example. I mean, like to shit on Pumpkin because I like to do that. The Tarask Bone Flail, which is obviously famously broken. It gave him the Grim Reaper power. Well, the fuck? That should be what the Grim Reaper drops, not the Tarask. Give it cool things that the Tarask can do. Like, for example, we're here. We're talking to spoilers, right? Like, we're making the cool item that Spawn of Triune dropped from the raid. And we're like, okay, well, what did the Spawn of Triune do? What was the Spawn of Triune's themes? Okay, there was 3. Oh, okay, so let's make it tied around these ideas of what that creature could do, because then it feels like it's very much tied to that, and I think that's important. I think that's what makes it very cool. Geez, I do not remember the name of this stupid password. Man. Sorry about this. Now I'm just frustrated. All right, fuck. Man. Hey, I guessed random passwords and we totally got it. Sorry about that. I actually just, I was so annoyed by this as everybody jumps off. Oh, okay. Yeah. Monsters roll on tables. Different what they do. I really do like that stuff. That's really cool. All right, here we go. Yep. Not quite, but you're not too far off, actually, honestly. All right. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share my screen. Let me do this right here. Whiteboard. Okay. So here we have Abomination Vaults. We can see Otari here. We can see the PCs. We got Grizzlock. That was Tim's gnome druid. Apparently there were two of them. I guess we copied his token a bunch. Here was Aaron's wizard or sorcerer, Tessius. He also had free archetype Beastmaster, of course. So that was his bear, Longclaw. Anyways, over here on the right, you can see that I have some custom items. And there were actually, so here, we'll discuss this. This is how right? Ostensibly, this is Abomination Vaults, right? It's a dungeon. I'm not going to show too much of the dungeon, but again, we played through the first 4 levels. I understood this is Pathfinder 2nd edition. So how do I encourage or how do I reward the players? All right. So the first thing, which let's see if I have it here. So the first thing here is this. These are called Discovery Awards. All right. When the players accomplish one of these tasks, they gain a certain number of discovery points. Okay. So if when they find a new room, they get 1 discovery point. When they find a major room, an important room in the dungeon, they get 2 points. Secret passage, 2 points. Stairs to a new level, 5 points. A spirit well. That's one of those circular chambers where the corsating energy of the dungeon courses through. A portal chamber, a new entrance to the dungeon. You could also see that I had a section for lore. If they find a new creature and successfully identify it, they get 1 point. If they find out minor lore about the dungeon and its history, 2 points. Learn major lore, 4 points, etc., etc., etc. I also gave it to them for deeds and for determinism and incredible heroism. Now, in fact, there was also a custom item that you could see that was called determination, and they would track this on their character sheet. So if we look at Aaron's character sheet here and we go to his items, inventory. Let's see if he had it here. He had determination, although it looks like it got screwed up in the conversion over the thing. But each player would track their determination individually. Now, what did determination do? Simple. Every 10 points of determination that you gained gave you a hero point. And at this time, I was using Derek hero points, right? Which, to be fair, were really powerful and broken, and we probably should not have been using them. But, I also like the idea of using better than normal hero points. You did not get hero points in my game. You did not get 1 for just showing up. You did not get 1 every hour. In this game of Abomination Vaults, you got to keep your hero points from session to session from session. Or rather, I should say, you had to keep your determination. And you could spend 10 determination at any time to essentially do the same thing that you could do with a hero point. So building up your determination meant that your character had a lot more hero points. And some of the characters, again, I don't know if it got completely screwed up because of the transfer over, but some of the characters had a lot of character. I don't know what happened to them. Okay, but a lot of the characters had some of these determinations. Now, why did I do that? Because I wanted to give them a reason to explore, and I wanted them to have something to do while they were exploring through the ruins, right? Secondly, on each level of the gauntlet, or of each level of the dungeon, there was a spirit well. And in the game, I'm not gonna spoiler alert for anybody who's playing Abomination Vaults, but okay, like you can see that each chamber or each level of the dungeon has one of these circular chambers in the middle, which is where the energy of the gauntlet is located, right? They're all sort of tied up all the way to level 1, where there's, all of these different areas. And so I created these spirit wells, one for each of these. So there was Spirit Well of the Ruins. That's level 1 because it's called the Ruins. And level 2 is called Spirit Well of the Servants, Spirit Well of the Library, Spirit Well of the Sanctum, because those are the names of the levels. So if the group makes their way to the Spirit Well, and I don't think I have the rules here, but if you do this, I think when you bind yourself to the Spirit Well, you become like Doomed 2 or Doomed 3 for a couple of days. So we'll get to that in a second. But when you bind yourself to the first level, you can get one of these 5 abilities: Ethereal Guidance, Ghost Step, Haunting Presence, Share Spirit, or Sustaining Soul. So Ethereal Guidance. While in combat or exploration mode, you may spend resolve points as if it was a hero point on recall knowledge. Oh yeah, we also used resolve. We basically used kind of, healing surges. So this let you spend resolve points in order to re-roll recall knowledge checks, which you have a lot more resolve than you do at hero points. Ghost Step let you, when you stepped, you got to take a 10-foot step instead of a 5-foot step. Haunting Presence gave you fear as a focus pool spell. Notice it's not a focus pool, it's a spirit pool. It was a separate focus pool that was dedicated just to fear. Now, this might sound really powerful and broken. To be fair, it was to a reasonable extent, but a lot of these creatures are undead and constructs and they're immune to fear, so it kind of balanced it out, although this was pretty powerful. Share Spirit. As a free action, you may spend 2 resolve points to grant an ally within 30 feet 1 resolve point. And again, remember, resolve points in the optional system from the GMG are how you would heal your character. And Sustaining Soul gave you False Life as a focus spell. And again, you gained a spirit pool of 1. So that each player got to pick from one of these 5 abilities. Several of them could pick the same ability, or they could each pick different ones. And the point was, each level had 5 different abilities. Ethereal Command, Ghost Walk, Phantom Stride. Phantom Stride. If you end a stride action more than 20 feet away from your starting location, gain the effects of a blur spell until the start of your next turn. So the idea is like, if you move fast enough, you kind of, become ghost-like and leave an ephemeral trail. It's like you have concealment because you have the blur, but it's not like the kind of concealment you can use to hide. It's like a blur spell. You could also get Spectral Power, increase that spirit pool by 1 point. Spirit Bonds, you gain Shield Other as a focus spell. So I kind of created my own system and resource, and they ended up picking up, a bunch of these different abilities that were all kind of thematically tied to what was going on with that level. And it became a really big driving force for why they wanted to go to a new level. And so when they would go to a new level, the first thing that they would start thinking about is, where is the spirit well? Let's find it so that we can get a cool new ability. Now, as I said, I was also being lazy and I just wanted to run Abomination Vaults and not have it, have to rework everything. And Pathfinder 2, the math's pretty tight. And by the time they picked up, 3 or 4 of these abilities, they were starting to be pretty powerful and it could be, problematic. Great role-playing Debbie. Superchat says, so when can we expect the last call zebra element for the kineticist? I know. We designed the zebra, but we never really finished the zebra design. We do need a zebra. In terms of an element, I don't know. We started that zebra process, but there were so many different ideas in the forums on the Discord about what we should do with the zebra element. We do need to revisit that at some point, just for the funny and the lulz. We've just been so busy with everything. Shadram says, that's a great approach. I played Abomination Vaults, and most of the time my characters had no idea why my character was there. Oh, that's a great point. I should bring that up. I had a system that was different from the one in the game. Again, a light spoiler alert for Abomination Vaults. In the adventure, shortly after the adventure begins, the villain beams a bunch of monsters into the graveyard of Otari. Okay. And the PCs have a fight against some undead and abomination thing. And then they beat it and they're like, okay, we got to do the, someone's active in the gauntlet. What I did in my game is I changed it up a little bit. What I did is every month on the full moon, on the night of the full moon, Belcora would activate the gauntlet and send another beam to destroy Otari. But each month, the difficulty of the encounter would increase by 2 levels. So if the first one was a level 2 encounter, the next one a month later would be a level 4, and the one a month after that would be level 6, and the one after that would be a level 8, and the one after that is level 10, and so on and so forth. Now the group knew this. They figured out, okay, this happens every month. And so when a firing would occur, they knew that they had 4 weeks in game time. They could use it however they wanted to explore the dungeon, recover from conditions that they took, craft, do any sort of other, downtime actions that you would do in PF2. But they knew that the next encounter was coming in 1 month and would be 2 levels higher. So there was also a pressure to go, get experience and level up, because they wanted to be strong enough to be able to just defeat it. And I tried to make it a tough encounter. And by the way, if they gained a bunch of levels, the encounter didn't get harder. So if they were level 6 and it was the level 4, they did that in 2 months' time, and now I'm about to fire the level 4 encounter, then guess what? They get to crush it. They did the work. They put in the time. I'm not going to just make it always be party level +2, because now there's no incentive for them to fucking do the encounter or a dungeon. If someone's going to get stronger, Frostjack, then let them be strong. So now the key thing about this time crunch is it's not, you have 1 month to defeat the dungeon or everybody dies. No, it's escalating. It's predictable. It's not too much. We all know that if a group really wanted to, they could probably gain a level in just a day or two, in game time. But what this means is that if the group lollygags and, after every encounter or two, they go back to Otari and they rest for a night, and they go back and have another encounter, and then they have a rest for the night, eventually that time is going to catch up to them, and they're going to start to feel the time pressure. But it's not an existential threat. Now, if they completely shit the bed and they do not do anything, and they just were like, I'm going to wait, we'll wait 3 months. Well, then a level 2, a level 4, a level 6, a level 8 encounter will get beamed into Otari over the course of each month. And now they're not high enough level to stop it. And Otari starts to get destroyed. Maybe not completely at first, but eventually the level gets high enough and the PCs are too behind the curve, they will get destroyed. And so it provided a sort of fun pacing and tension mechanic, because it contrasted with their desire to get into the dungeon and start exploring everything and finding these, not only doing what the adventure expects you to do, but also finding the spirit wells and the treasure and the experience points and all this other stuff. I guess I deleted those characters. So that's what I wanted to show you, is like, not only was it about, now again, it did mess with the math a little bit. I probably made these a little too good. I'm not going to lie. But it also probably could have been that I was using my old hero points, which were very broken. So, I think that this stuff is fun. Now, none of these abilities that these people had was, this one, spectral reflexes, is something that you could gain in the Spirit Well of the Servants. Decrease the number of actions the ready action requires by 1. So you could ready as a single action. if you had spectral reflexes. Now, that's not an ability in the game. Is that ability broken? I don't know. I don't even know if anybody took it. But, it is something that I think at least makes it. And the players knew that, though. They knew they weren't just getting that feat because it was in a book and they got to take it because they leveled up. They got it because they did something very specific. They overcame some very specific challenges. And that's what made it feel so much more, satisfying. Let's see here. Hey. I love it. I wish I were running AV with that instead of playing AV without it. Yeah, I mean, again, Abomination Vaults is one of my favorite APs that they've ever done because it's basically just a dungeon. But without adding some of those elements to make exploration feel worthwhile, and without maybe putting in some sticks to sort of make exploration difficult, it's hard to do because random encounters are really tricky in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. You got to be very careful with them. So my methodology was to just use this time-based escalating encounter. Melissa also enjoyed that idea. And Strat is 100% correct here. It doesn't really even matter if the time crunch is like difficult, right? It's something in their mind where they go, we can't take forever. And that is all it really takes for the PCs to just feel like, okay, we probably need to get to go on. We can't just craft in town for 30 days, but we also don't have to, do this tomorrow or the world ends. We have enough time that, and by the way, when we would play, first week or two after the firing occurred, right? And after the gauntlet would fire its beam into Otari and teleport in a bunch of monsters, the party would have this big epic fight in the town. And, then they'd be like, oh yeah, we got a lot of time. It's like when you finish up, when you're in college or whatever, and you finish up exams, or midterms, and you're like, oh, you feel so relaxed afterwards. You're like, oh, I've got so much free time. I've got all the time in the world. But then, time starts to pass on and you get closer to finals and you start getting real nervous again. You're like, oh God, I'm not as ready as I want. So after the firing would occur and they'd have this big battle that, especially because they knew it was coming, it was a great battle that they could prepare for. They could use some other different, buffs and magical abilities or spells that you might not ordinarily get to use because you don't know that a fight is coming. But, they would feel like, oh, we have all the time in the world. The world is our oyster. We can do whatever we want. And then sure enough, after a session or two, I'd be like, okay, it's 4 days until the gauntlet fires. They'd be like, oh man, boy, you know what? Let's not go back to town. Let's just keep going because I really think we could probably get another level gained before that fires. And boy, I would feel a lot better if we were another level higher than we need to be, because that would make it, then it's because they don't want to have a tough fight. They want to have a tough fight, but they also don't want to have a tough fight. And that's what makes it so fun. And so the players started making conversations and being like, well, how many focus spells do you have up here? Right? Because Gauntlet, let's be clear about Abomination Vaults. I mean, this is to scale, people. Oh, I switched stuff. The dungeon is an hour, maybe 30 minutes away from town. There's nothing that stops your characters from just being like, I go sleep. I'm telling you, there's nothing. You need to add that, or otherwise it's just the exploration in Pathfinder 2nd Edition just has no bite. I mean, that'd be tough to sell even in an OSR game. Hey, there's no random encounters and the town is 30 minutes away. Dude, as soon as I take any amount of hit point damage, I go back to town and I rest for a week. What's going to happen, right? Lollipop says, lol, I need the KOLC edition of AV. I second this. I mean, that's really all I changed, Damien says, Kingmaker is the closest Pathfinder ever got to a sandbox location-based exploration module. It's very true. And even then, it still had some problems. The time crunch makes it less video gamey. Things just don't happen as long as I don't go to the next level. So we can just grind level. Right, exactly. I treat, to a certain extent, the forces within Abomination Vaults as having fronts, as having goals and motivations. I don't wait until the PCs enter the room for the dynamic event to trigger. Now, I'm not going to like fuck over my PCs and be like, ha ha ha, there was something down on level 8 that if you didn't stop in 37 days was going to get really strong and destroy everybody. And you never knew about it. And now it's day 36 and haha, tomorrow you're all dead. Like, I don't like to do that. That's being a dick. But, you know, I generally speaking, I like to foreshadow a little bit. I'll read, you know, a level ahead or something like that. And I go, oh, I know what the next level is. The next level is the, you know, the arena. And it's like, okay, how can I, you know, preview that a little bit on levels 4 and 3 in a time-based series? Like the players start to feel like, oh, maybe we should find the way down to level 5, because if we don't, something bad's going to happen. Right. Like I'm trying to create, in-game motivation reasons for them to do these things. Let's see. Derek set up everything so the players have to make tough and impactful decisions outside of combat. Exactly. I mean, that is exactly what I want them to do. And by the way, like there are different styles of game. When I play certain, you know, very hard-hitting narrative games, you know, the Mouse Guards, the Apocalypse Worlds, the Monster Hearts, I want to really put people into a fight. You know, I want to put them into a tough situation. Like, you know, because again, I'm just trying to find out what the players are going to do. And I feel pretty empowered to make it this like a horrible choice, right? Like a Pyrrhic choice. Like, do you completely abandon your beliefs or do you let this person die? You know, just a horrible, gut-wrenching decision, you know, one that you would hope you would never have to make in real life ever. But in fantasy adventure games, you know, I'm a little bit more like, oh, you know, you want to go do this awesome thing, but you got to also think about this awesome thing. Because like, let me be clear about this. My players, they weren't really dreading these big battles that happened every month when the gauntlet would fire and beam in an encounter. They kind of look forward to it, right? In a weird way. Like the players did, right? Like the cleric or the players, the PCs were probably like, oh no, we must stop this evil before it destroys Otari. But like the players were like, oh shit, yeah, we got that thing laced up with, we did all those traps and those pits. We've got a defensive perimeter. Now we have access to this wall of stone spell. We're going to create like a bottleneck and we'll just, you know, it became almost like a Plants versus Zombies game inside Pathfinder 2nd edition. And so in a way, it was kind of the best of both worlds, because it was like this pressure and this time and they needed to act quick, but they also were kind of like, you know, let's just wait. Like there would be times too where like they'd have like a week left and you know, Smith would say, guys, you know, it's like 4 or 5 days until the thing fires. I don't want to risk it. Like if we get messed up or, you know, fucked up or something happens, like let's just wait in town for 4 days. We'll make all of our final preparations. We'll be ready. And I was like, all right, like, you know, and like they took it seriously. That was important, but they weren't like, oh my God, no. They were kind of like, yeah, it's time to have this awesome fight, you know? Right. You can also do hey, there's a ton of cool things you can get. Which one do you want to pursue? And that works too for a game. Exactly. Yes. I said that. I just said that. So, you know, it just comes down to choices. That is what site-based adventure is designed. It's not about rooms, right? It's not about rooms. It's about choices. It's not about rooms. It's about choices. It's not about points in a point crawl. It's about interesting choices. That's what makes these site-based adventures so fun, is the players are constantly having to evaluate and reevaluate what's important to me right now. What do I care about? What am I willing to risk? What am I willing to gain? Like, and you got to be willing, you know, you got to be willing to throw down, you know, the hammer.
450
hey,
guards.
guards.
$10. Chugga chugga choo choo. All aboard the world building train. Plus I need more tips on how to use all the books you convinced me to buy.
That is true. Although that is quite the library. Thank you, guards. Because yeah, that's like drinking from the fire hose. There's so much there that, I mean, you could just get swept up in world creation. And like I said, there is something to be said about not creating more than you must, but there is sometimes it could be a little overwhelming. So I appreciate the tip. Shadram says, tower defense mechanics in an RPG. Is that a thing? Should it be? I mean, it's more like it provided an opportunity, Shadram, to do a little combat as war inside Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And, you know, I could be like, okay, I'm going to throw an extreme fight for a level 4 party at them this next month. And I'm not going to do it with high PLs. I'm going to do it with more like a lot of PL -1s or, you know, PL -2s. And then the group knew that. And then sometimes, you know, there would also sometimes be like one big monster. And it enabled them to be like, okay, how are we going to handle this? Now, in some instances, they were high enough level that they were just like, yeah, we'll just fight them all. We'll just kill them all. Like it's not a big issue. But you know, there was other mechanics to the game, to the fights as well, because, you know, a lot of those creatures were trying to make it, they didn't care about the party. They were trying to essentially to make it past the party and get into town and destroy things. So people were like, you had to kind of control them and constrain them. It wasn't just about killing them. They had places to go and people to kill. Do we have a Google list in the Discord of recommended books? I don't think so, Melissa. Someone may have put one together, but I don't think I've put anything officially together. I love that about NR2. I love the raid prep phase about as much as the raid phase itself. And Strat, that is so accurate. When I think back to all of my, you know, the last 30 years of gaming, certainly the last 20 with, you know, 3rd edition D&D and playing with, you know, Aaron and Tim, what made these games so fun to me was the way that people would talk about it, strategize about it between game sessions. Let me tell you that the clearest sign that your game is doing well is when your players on their own, in your group chat, in your Discord, via email, whatever, are talking about your game between sessions. I think we all know that for a lot of players out there, when the game session ends, they close their book, they stuff their character sheet inside, they close Roll20 or Foundry, and they do not think about your game at all until the next week, and it's time to play the game. And they're opening up the book and they're pulling out the character sheet. It hasn't been touched. It hasn't been looked at. It's been out of their memory completely. But when your game is interesting enough that the players are like scheming and strategizing between the sessions, and they're like trying to come up with clever different ways to approach a problem, like that's a good place to be. You've got your low level Pathfinder dungeon. You put a really sweet magical item in there, and you put a level 6 monster in guarding it. The players don't have to fight it. It's not part of the path. And the players go, we're level 2. That's level 6. That's PL +4. That's an extreme encounter. It'll probably wipe the floor with us. There's a great chance that some of us, all of us, any of us could die. Not worth it. But wait. We know what kind of monster it is. So what if we took this precaution and this precaution? What if we did this? What if we tried that? Could we maybe get around it? And like when the players are having that kind of like back and forth, that's like the best moment. Now to go back to where the stream was when I got called away to work. Cheers, guards. Thank you so much for the tips. Wicked once has a lair defense phase. It was a lot of fun. We got to build our base up and see how defense did. That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, that sounds kind of like a tower defense, Shadram, for sure. My players have a Discord chat that they use between sessions, but they won't let me join it. I love. In fact, you know what that reminds me of? Back in 3.0, so before 3.5, we were playing Heart of Nightfang Spire, classic adventure. And the group throughout Heart of Nightfang Spire, the villain of Heart of Nightfang Spire is a vampire wizard named Gulthias. And he lairs in the center of the tower. You actually have to go down the tower from the top down. It's really cool. And then you have to go up into the core, which is in the center of the tower. And they knew that this was a wizard. And Gulthias had been scrying on them for weeks and weeks, many, 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 many sessions it took them to go through this dungeon. And I said, look, guys, here's the deal. This NPC wizard has really, really high intelligence. He's a vampire. You know me, Derek, I love wizards. This guy's been watching you for weeks. I am going to metagame the shit out of this wizard. I'm going to build this wizard with the exact what Derek would do in order to kill your PCs. Like, this guy is coming for you. He knows I can cheat as much as I want, essentially, because he knows everything about it. He knows everything that I would know as a GM of the game. And everyone's like, okay, that's fine. That's sweet. All right. That's fair. But then they're like, okay, well, we've got our plan, Derek. They came to the next session, the fight where they were going to go confront Gulthias. And they said, okay, well, we've talked. And I was like, oh, you talked? They're like, yeah, we have our plan too, but fair is fair. We've bought some magical items. I feel confident that you would have approved us purchasing them. But you got to trust us because we're not going to tell you what they are. So is that okay? Like, are you okay? Because you have your tricks up your sleeve, but we want to have our tricks up our sleeve. And I was like, okay, that's fair. So the fight starts. This was like, it took like 8 hours, over 8 hours. It might have been 10 hours. Fighting this vampire who had like so many buffs up and just like, it was an incredible fight. And there was one of the characters was Brennard, who was a barbarian, a lot of hit points. And the whole fight, Brennard had basically spent being just, Brennard was the primary damage dealer of the entire group. And he had just been getting nickel and dimed the entire fight. Down, 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 down. And I was getting finally close to killing him. And, I'd gone through, 150, 160 hit points. And finally, I'm about to kill him. And Aaron's turn comes up. And he was playing a paladin cleric ASMR named Ambriel. And he goes, Ambriel strides over to Brennard, pulling out a scroll that you have not seen up until this moment. It is made of, silvery paper and seems to glow with an unearthly light. He pulls it out. And he goes, okay, I'm going to make a caster level check to cast this Scroll of Heal. This is 3.0 heal, where heal heals you to full completely. It healed you, but of all but 1d4 hit points. So in other words, it heals you all the way to full, and then you would lose like a couple hit points. So you might be like 2 or 3 off of max. I didn't realize they had like sold half their magic items and all this other stuff to be able to afford this. I had no idea that they had it. And it was just like such a gut punching moment. And I remember the wizard, this was Old Haste in 3rd edition, where you basically got to take two actions a turn. He had a maximized wand of magic missile. So each casting of it did 25 damage. So with his haste action, with his 2 actions that he got because he was hasted, he could just go 25, just do 50. No save, no armor class. And Ambriel was wearing, he's a paladin cleric. So he had really good saves, really high charisma. So huge divine grace bonus, and was wearing full plate. And I had already done some damage to him. And when he did that, I just went, he spends his whole turns, boom, boom, and just hits him for 25, hits you for 50. And he's like, yep, all right, I'm down. And I was like, okay. And he's like, that's all right. I deserve that. I deserve that. Because he just healed the barbarian for, all this stuff. Reminded, this fight was 10 hours. Yeah, I couldn't remember exactly. It was the whole session. I mean, and back then we probably used to play from like, 6 o'clock to maybe like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of like bullshitting and stuff like that, but yeah, it was probably 6 or 7 or 8 hours. It could have been as long as 10. I don't actually personally remember, but, and again, it was a final boss of a adventure that they had been playing for months and months and months. And, there was Brennard, the dwarf barbarian, and Ambriel, the ASMR paladin cleric, Axis Sunstone, the elven ranger, Flaren or Delmatrin or something, the wizard. I can't remember his name actually. And then there was Roscoe, which was a halfling rogue. back in 3.0 days, I had a friend playing a cleric who is surrounded by Nightwalkers. Oh, I'm well aware of what a Nightwalker is. Super undead. He pulled out a mass heal, reducing each Nightwalker to D4 hit points, then did a whirlwind attack. Beautiful. I still like running those big multi-hour fights. Again, a fight isn't bad because it's long. If it's interesting and entertaining and the group is there for it, then I think it can be totally fine. I just question whether or not that, it's worth it. Like a lot of times I think that they can get really boring and out of, the challenge goes away and you just end up kind of dragging it. It's got to stay dynamic. It's got to stay interesting. Should have used the scroll on the vamp. Well, I'm sure, I don't know. I didn't know that he had it. I'm sure he considered it. I mean, that might have been even their original plan, Mark. But all I know is that because I remember too, like Gulthias, the vampire wizard, Brennard had fought, he could fly and stuff like that. Brennard had fought his way up until through a bunch of lesser undead onto the middle level of the platform and was finally heading towards the vampire, who had moved back over the platform to gain cover against the attacks from the rogue who was shooting with a bow. And the vampire, cast like some sort of big bees hand spell. And the barbarian spent 3 rounds just trying to get his way free of the hand. And so it was just like he kept getting slow down. And finally he got close to enough to the vampire to actually get into melee. And everyone's like, oh, this is going to be good. And I go, yeah, buddy, but you've run out. You've just taken too much damage. I'm going to kill you. And then he got that full heal. And it was just the vampire went from over the first 6 hours of the fight, the vampire maybe took 20 or 30% of his hit points. And then it took an hour or maybe 30 minutes for him to lose the last 70%, because the wizard finally ran out of spells. The party had overcome that hurdle, right? The tension, we talk about the tension curve all the time. The tension of that fight had been building and building and building and building as it's oh man, we're running out of hit points. This guy is so strong and powerful. And then they finally did the awesome thing where Brennard broke free from the Big V's grasping hand. He got a complete heal from the paladin cleric. He closed the melee and just started wailing away with his flaming greatsword. And then it was okay, you know what? You guys did the damn thing. And the fight ended really quickly after that, because at that point the tension had sort of peaked. So Mark says, no, what's the worst is when you get done with a long fight and the players forget what they're supposed to be doing and undo all of your momentum to close the adventure. Yeah. We've all been there. Back in my old days, my players would constantly talk about the campaign between sessions. Nowadays, I feel everyone is too busy and I don't see that happen as much. That is absolutely, the case. I mean, people, it was a lot easier when we were younger, Joe. It was a lot easier when we were younger. Self-confessed cynic says, whiteboard question, what is a good tension curve for the entire site-based adventure? All right, we'll hop over. I do want to stress says there's another world where the caster level check fails. That's right. That is absolutely right. And you know what? I'm not even going to lie. In a sense, that entire fight came down to that one check. And, we talk about all the time about how do you make D20 rolls interesting, how do you make dice rolls interesting? And, Powered by the Apocalypse would tell you that you make them interesting by making it so that failure is interesting and you fail forward and that there's always narrative consequences, which is a totally acceptable way to do it. The other way you make dice rolls interesting is you fucking make everything hang on that die roll. This is not just some, oh, do I kill him this round or do I kill him next round? It's nope, this die roll is do or die. If this roll passes, we've got it. If this roll fails, it's all over for us. It's not a question of just, when we're going to kill it. It's if. And it came down, this whole fight was just building to this one die roll moment. That's a big die roll. That's a cool moment when everybody is if that's happening and somebody's still on their fucking phone, they got something wrong with them. That is what I play D&D for. It's for that, hail. And you know what? I understand that, 80% of the time, 50% of the time, whatever, it's going to come up failure. And it's going to be like, yeah, you know what? We all died. But guess what? Cool. I didn't die. Derek gets to keep playing. That's why I'm playing role-playing games. It's a stolen car. I'll just get another one, like in Grand Theft Auto. But when it succeeds, oh man, it is so sweet. Now let's hop over to the whiteboard, which is currently still on Otari. All right. So let us think about this a little bit. What is a good curve, tension curve, for a site-based adventure? So that's actually an interesting idea. Because I think what you need to think of it as is, that's a really good question. Because, what you want to do is provide a series of victories within a site. So, again, we'll make it really simple here, but, let's say that you had this is our entrance. And, we have a series of chambers here. What's going on? There we go. And we've got a super linear dungeon, but imagine that there's much more interesting choices and stuff to be made here. But what ends up happening is, I think it's important, I've talked about this before in dungeon design, that you create what I call closed loops within your dungeon. So like, and I'm doing this very, very quickly, so pardon me if any of this doesn't seem like it makes any sense. But like, so this is sort of our main thoroughfare of our dungeon, right? And we can see that this branch leads into sort of this closed off subsection of the dungeon, right? What I want, provides us with a fantastic opportunity to sort of create a tension curve that can build up and resolve, but without doing the entire dungeon all at once. So, because part of the problem with a site-based adventure design is if you do like the standard, like if you only use one curve, it just keeps building up, 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 and then drop off a cliff when the adventure is finally done and they kill the big dragon at the end of your dungeon. This long burn can get really, really, really boring. So I think what you need to do, and plus, not to mention, like that's just a lot of, it's a lot of tension to maintain. So I think what you want to do here is you want to create minor moments of tension, okay, that can be resolved quickly, and then the tension resets back to zero, okay? So, it's like I use the example of when you play Dread, which is the RPG that you pull Jenga tower blocks out of, okay? When the tower falls, as people start pulling out, bricks from the Jenga tower, right? The tension starts building really high. And then eventually the tower collapses, right? And, the tension is resolved and somebody dies. And then what you do is you rebuild the tower. But when you rebuild the tower the first time, it's like Commander from Magic the Gathering. Each time you rebuild the tower, you have to start with less bricks in it. So the first time it falls, you rebuild it, but now there's 2 less bricks in it right from the start. Now the tension is still much lower than it was just a few moments ago. But notice it doesn't go all the way back down to the baseline, right? Now it comes down to this level. And now the tension starts to rebuild again, but now the tension gets a little bit higher, and then the tower falls again. But now when you rebuild it, you have to take out 4 bricks before we even begin back playing again. So now the tension starts here, and you get this slow series of rises. And then eventually, after you've dealt with all of the different components, all that's left, right, is Gulthias in his, spectral heart. And now the tension is peaked because the players are ready, you're ready, but they've had a bunch of victories inside of the dungeon already that even if they were to fail against the final boss, maybe even if that resulted in their TPK or their death, they wouldn't feel like, well, we accomplished nothing, either as PCs or as players. They would look back over that adventure and say, yeah, we died at the end, but that was really cool how we defeated that, entire cave full of specters. That was a really cool moment for us. Or we went down into the Giralon caves and we made, peace with them and freed them of their bondage to the, mind magic of Gulthias. Like, it's important to have these kind of subsections, I think, within your dungeon, because you just can't have a dungeon be like ever escalating tension. Number one, it would be hard to do. And number two, it would just, I think players would just get bored with it. They would become desensitized to it, and it just wouldn't really work. I mean, if you think about it, that's even the way that I did Abomination Vaults with the Gauntlet, right? The players would start adventuring, and the time was passing. The Gauntlet is going to fire, and then the Gauntlet would fire, and they would beat the Gauntlet, and then the tension would go back down. But now, the next time it fires, it's going to be, this was a level 2 encounter extreme. The next one's going to be a level 4 encounter extreme. So it starts to rebuild, and then they beat it, but now the next one's going to be level 6. So, I think it just continues to build in that capacity. The good old days are called the good old days for a reason. Yes, they are. GM Scott, holy crap, you're still going. Yeah, everyone's great. Having a great conversation, good questions. Everyone's been really great tonight with the tips and the super chats. I really appreciate it. All right, we had that in Northern Reaches. Entire party down, last PC standing, needed a nat 20 to win. Otherwise, they would have TPK'd, and the Drider would have wrecked the faction that the PCs befriended. When a situation like that emerges, now granted, I use the term organically, but obviously as a GM, you are putting these situations, you're putting these monsters and these factions into play on the premise or the hope that you're going to end up in a situation where it's on the line. But when it does, and you don't force it, you didn't fudge it to get to that point, and everybody at the table, including the GM, understands what's at really at risk here. Could be a TPK, could be the loss of the faction benefits that you gained. And it comes down to that single die roll. Nothing will ever beat that. There is no game on earth. I love board games. I don't love video games, but I used to love video games. I love Magic the Gathering. I love card games. Nothing is more satisfying than that moment. And that is the moment for why, as a GM and as a player, for why I play role-playing games. Because I want to chase those moments. And it's safe to chase them. And now, to be fair, in another world, I would be probably a gambling addict. I know plenty of people in my personal life who are gambling addicts because they are chasing that feeling of, putting it all on 20 red or 20 black or whatever, and it spins the wheel and the ball, tick, 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 tick. Oh, it's 20. Oh my God. But in real life, that can, bankrupt you, and it can cause your, friendships and social relationships to fall apart. So, in real life, chasing highs, gambling, drugs, whatever, alcohol can lead to real consequences. But in D&D, those consequences are just imaginary. They're just pretend. You can gamble with your character's life or your character's money in D&D, and it doesn't matter because you can always, make another character, play in the next campaign. So it's like you get all the good, but none of the bad. It's awesome. For my site-based stuff, usually it's very low tension for almost all of it, with little peaks and wins, and then a big fun finale. I think that is mostly, the same. I like the idea of a feeling that as you make your progress through, that there is more stuff. Like the PCs are supposed to be, they should be escalating the situation, right? The situation should feel like it's escalating because the PCs are involved, and that should make it feel like things are changing and they're changing quickly because the PCs are such a big influence and such a big impact to the whole game. Let's see here. Melissa's off to play Northern Reaches. Thank you for the stream. Thank you for your patronage. Enjoy your NR game. Does this work equally for multi-site and single-site campaigns, or does this really only work in a big dungeon? No, I think it absolutely works for single-site and multi-site campaigns. No, it doesn't have to be a big dungeon at all. Absolutely not. It's just smaller scale stuff. I mean, you got to think. I mean, I am thinking bigger than what you would see in a Paizo Adventure Path. You know, the dungeons in Paizo Adventure Paths, to my most of the time, unless it's like Abomination Vaults, and even then, they call Abomination Vaults a mega dungeon. They call Emerald Spire a mega dungeon. That is not a mega dungeon. That is a regular dungeon to me. You know, I know Vin has said like, oh my God, I've never had a dungeon. I think it's Vin who's like, the idea of creating a dungeon that the group would spend multiple sessions in is crazy, let alone 10 sessions or something like that. So I think it can work. How would you even do constant rising tension? Entire dungeon is single combat is the only way I can imagine that. No. So yeah, there's a couple different ways. Like, obviously if you're fighting intelligent foes, right, they're going to become more and more prepared. They are going to form alliances. They're going to try to trap the party. They're going to try to attack the party. If it's unintelligent creatures, perhaps they begin to, as a party, unlocks one part of the dungeon that unleashes a new wave of energy. A new type of enemy is appearing, drawn by what the PCs have done, changing the location, but changing it in a way that's going to increase and ratchet up the tension. You don't always have to do these. They're just an option in your toolbox that you should consider. Joe, why do you think Paizo or WotC doesn't release single adventures that follow one after the other, like the series that began with the Sunless Citadel? Because they don't sell. Also because adventures are only bought by the DM. So already, in one of these, there's a huge shortage of DMs out there. Makes much more sense to sell a book to players than it does to the DM, because then 6 or 7 people buy it in a group, not just one. So really it comes down to economics. And then as for like people who do create adventures, people at some point grew disillusioned with the idea of adventures, and they wanted their RPG sessions to be more like movies or novels, right? With this grand epic plot that is intricately linked together, right? They wanted to turn every campaign sort of into the MCU, right? This huge production that takes you all the way from level 1 to level 2. The idea of creating just a series of adventures that are just cool locations. And, to be clear, Joe, those adventures weren't really linked to one another. It was more like Easter eggs. They would throw out little Easter eggs. Oh, remember that adventure? And you're like, oh yeah, cool. But like they were really independent. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that people's taste changed. They wanted the big, huge, epic. They wanted the choose your own adventure books, right? They wanted the novel experience. I wanted so badly for the ending of Stranger Things for that player to roll a 1 and everyone died. That would have been far more realistic. Yeah. I do like this idea of Michael of the vertical dungeon that's filling with water. I think that's really cool. There he is. Yes, a 5-session dungeon took me months to design to my liking. Couldn't imagine a years long one. Although to be fair, I actually like doing everything custom. Yeah. Level 1 of my Northern Region dungeon has about 200 rooms, I think. I didn't count. At that scale, you get by necessity, get quick about prep. That is totally true. Yeah, Joe, me too. In another world, Joe, where I could do this full time, I would maybe dream someday of making those kind of adventures, those modules. And I think that would just be awesome. Be the change you want to see in the world, right? Hoyrit is here. I think the economics of a player-driven books has really led to a worse game. Yeah, but I mean, it's a business and we can't deny that. But you know what? Now that Hoyrit's here, I'm going to end the stream with the full Rapanathuk story, which I never got a chance to actually tell. We've been talking about dungeons and site-based design. So a little bit of spoiler alert. Hoyrit killed the stream. Okay. So let me change this up here. Let me get some graph paper. We need graph paper here. Okay. So first things first, Rapanathuk is also known as the Dungeon of Graves. Okay. Both because the opening chamber is literally in a graveyard, but also because it just kills a lot of PCs. The last 10 pages of the book is an obituaries for your player characters, so you can write all the people that you killed. Okay, that's right, Shadram. Don't go down the well. So the opening Rapanathuk starts in a graveyard, which is actually in the shape of an inverted cross, and it's a cemetery. It's a graveyard. Okay. And in the center of it is a mausoleum made of green marble. And the party who enters this mausoleum will discover that this is a death trap. The doors close and the ceiling will collapse onto you in a number of rounds and will completely squish you and kill you. The only way to get out of this is to locate a secret door in the bottom of the room that leads to a tunnel, which leads into level 1 of the dungeon. So the very first encounter in this dungeon is a death trap. All right. That's step 1. Oh, I think I am sorry. Damn it. I did think I was sharing the whiteboard. All right, there we go. Okay. Rapanathuk starts in an inverted cross graveyard. There's a greenstone mausoleum and it's a death trap. And then it leads down into this passage. Now, this passage goes into some different chambers and some different areas to explore. And eventually, it comes to a T section. And past this T section, there is an intersection, which I guess is also a T section, with a pit trap. So my group was making their way through, so that my group, and by the way, the group came in, they survived the death trap, they make their way into the dungeon, and they're exploring, and, they're making their way through it, and they come up to here and discover the pit trap, and they're like, oh, sweet. So they decide to go this way. And when they go this way, they encounter a gelatinous cube. And the group is like, fall back. So they're like, oh, well, this will be sick. There's a big pit right there. So they fall back to the pit. And sure enough, the gelatinous cube falls perfectly into the 10-foot pit, which they then seal. So they're like, oh, this is sweet. Like, we've trapped the gelatinous cube. Nice. That's perfect. So they're like, okay, well, let's not go south. Let's go north. So they go north. And eventually, as you make your way north, you discover what is essentially an ancient bathroom. Okay. And it's got a bunch of stone privies, toilets. And the group, kind of nervous, are kind of poking around. And then finally, by the way, I should note here, the group, our buddy Aaron Smith was playing a rogue. My buddy Chris was playing a cleric with full plate and all that other stuff. And my buddy Dan was playing a wizard. All right. So the group is kind of like tentatively outside of the area. And spoiler alert, Aaron had and Dan had played Rapanathuk before. They had been part, by the way, there were some other players too. I'm just not going to, they're not relevant to the story, so I'm not going to put, I think there were 6 PCs in total. But Smith and Dan had played this prior, and it had not ended well for them. But we'll get to that in a second. But they had basically sworn, now they had encountered the level 1. So I basically swore them to secrecy. I said, you guys can participate in the combats and stuff, but don't spoiler alert anything, don't be like, oh, maybe you guys should look over there, to escape the death trap. And they were very good about it. They were very awesome about it. So Smith and Dan knew what was in this bathroom. So they were kind of like, not really saying anything. They were holding back. Finally, Chris, the cleric, kind of takes a look. And as he opens up one of the toilets to take a look, out flows a monster that is known as Dungy. Yes, literally, or Dungy. Dungy, according to, by the way, it's like literally 2 sentences in the book, is literally a mutated arcane mimic who was disguised as a toilet when a high-level wizard with a bunch of magical items came to take a shit. And the mimic ate him. And consuming all those magical items turns him into, and the book even says this, they said, this thing is invincible. It cannot be killed. Even the gods cannot destroy this thing. It is 100% invincible. But it's kind of slow, and it's a shit mimic, okay? It's a big slurping mimic sludge ooze monster of feces that is invincible. So the group starts falling back, and they're shooting this thing with arrows, and they're like trying to, do their best friend, and they basically discover this thing is immune to basically close to everything. And they're falling back, and they get this idea as Dungy continues to surge after them. They're like, oh shit, they don't fully understand or appreciate how much this thing is immune to everything. So they go, we know about the pit trap. We'll go around it, and then Dungy will fall into the pit trap, and then it and the gelatinous cube can sort of like destroy each other, right? That's their plan. So they're falling back. And by the way, these things aren't 100% to scale. So the party makes it. They kind of jump over the pit trap or sneak by it. Dungy's not like the fastest thing in the world. And it gets to the pit trap. And you can imagine, I'll zoom in here. You can kind of imagine that the PCs are, kind of standing here waiting with bated breath. So they're like standing right here and right here and right here as they see this thing sludge down. And then sure enough, it falls into the pit trap and it lands into there. And they're kind of trying to see what's happening. And I decide that that's a perfect moment to roll a random encounter. So I roll a random encounter and I get a pack of ghouls. All right. You know the type. Paralyzing. And the pack of ghouls can obviously only come from one way, right? That's right. From this corridor, which is behind them. So the pack of ghouls comes surging forward, not only threatening to destroy the party, but also to cut them off because the only way they know to get out is back this way. So they turn around and they're like, oh shit, ghouls. So they start engaging, and there's like a lot of them, there's maybe like 8 or 9 or 10 ghouls. And I think they turn to the cleric and they go, oh, cleric, we'll be fine, right? And he goes, no, man, I used all of my turning undead attempts in the early encounters in the dungeon, including the cemetery. I'm out of turning attempts. They're like, oh shit, we have to fight these ghouls. We have to fight our way past it. So somebody gets paralyzed and the group is like, okay, well, I guess, we can't just run out. We have to actually kind of fight our way free because, we don't want to leave our companion around to die. So while they're doing this, they don't notice that Dungy is totally immune to everything. It just destroys the gelatinous cube in the bottom of the pit and starts to ooze out again. And actually, I described, they learned about this when I made an attack roll against the wizard, who is obviously here in the back rank. And he's like, wait, what's attacking me? All the ghouls, all the ghouls are up front. And I go, oh, yeah, that's the Dungy. That's the toilet monster. And everyone's like, oh shit, like a horror movie, right? Like the tendril just lands on him. And the wizard, this creature had a sort of a kind of like gelatinous cubes. It had like a sticky property where if it attacked you, it basically you would get stuck to it. And you had to make a DC 20 strength check in order to pull yourself free of the sort of the thick, sticky sludge that the creature had. So the whole party's getting destroyed. One PC, I think, is already dead from the ghouls. The cleric ends up getting pulled in by Dungy as well, and the wizard. So the cleric makes their DC 20 strength check, pulls themselves free, and the wizard rolls, but the wizard only has a +0 strength. He rolls a 19 on the D20. And I describe it as, okay, wizard, you know, you've got your body, you know, you've got your body and you got your arm, and you managed to pull yourself free of the horrendous monstrous creature, but only one like tendril of the creature is still stuck. It's stuck to your wrist. You know, you can't get out because, you know, you almost rolled a 20. You almost got there. So the next person to go is Aaron. And by the way, this wizard is played by our friend Dan. And Aaron goes, all right, I'm running up and I pull out my short sword. And everyone's like, dude, this thing is immune to damage. What are you going to do with that? He goes, oh, I'm not attacking the monster. And he chops the wizard's hand off below where the creature is stuck to him. So now the wizard doesn't have a hand and is bleeding. And the group is about to get completely caught off by another wave of ghouls. So they are like, we need to get out of here. Well, the fighter is still paralyzed, and the cleric is, I don't even remember what was wrong with the cleric. Long story short, the cleric's like, I have a remove paralysis scroll you need to use on the fighter. And the rogue had, used magic device. And he rolls a nat 1. And I go, okay, the remove paralysis spell backfires. Everybody in the party has to make a saving throw, fortitude saving throw, or become paralyzed. And everyone's like, oh my God. Luckily, everybody makes their saving throw. And the people are able to lift up their not dead, but paralyzed opponents and leave. And they beat a hasty retreat out. And with the Dungy and the ghouls started tearing at each other, and then they beat their retreat, and they make it all the way back out to the mausoleum and to the graveyard, and then they beat their hasty retreat. I told this story to the forum at the time of Necromancer Games, who originally wrote this, and all the GMs there were loving this story. But one of the GMs goes, "Oh, you forgot that the mausoleum is actually surrounded by a bunch of gargoyles. And you totally babied those players. You should have had the gargoyles animate and kill them as they fled off from the dungeon." And I was just like cracking up. So when all was said and done, we were looking at what had happened to the party. And, the cleric had lost their full plate, their holy symbol, their +1 full plate, actually. It had gotten dissolved by the monster while he was grappled. And then the wizard was like, what am I going to do? I'm missing a hand. And I go, well, it's going to be tough for you to cast spells with only one hand. And then he's like, well, at least I still have my spell book. And I go, actually, no, you had your spell book on you. And when you got destroyed, when you got eaten by the monster, it got completely destroyed. And he's like, oh my God, this sucks so bad. What am I supposed to do? And then Aaron told him he should take the ambidexterity feat to try to make up for the fact that he had lost his primary hand. But what makes this so funny is the first time that we played this adventure, it was just Aaron and it was just Dan. But they were higher level. They had 2 PCs that were higher level. These PCs were maybe like level 4. These PCs were like level 9. And this was Aaron's super high level paladin who had a sun sword, which is a holy sword, basically, he was a paladin of Lathander. And I don't remember what Dan was. Oh, Dan was a ranger. And they go in they go into the adventure, and Dan's character gets swallowed by Dungy, and Aaron attacks it with his sun sword and finds that his sun sword gets stuck inside of the monster. Aaron's paladin is not stuck, just the sun sword. And I basically, they figure out, this is the first time they're fighting it. They basically figure out this thing is immune to everything. And so they're like, well, shit. And Aaron's like, damn it. And Dan is like, you got to get me out of here. I'm gonna die here. And he's like, I'm sorry. And he's like, and he makes a strength check to pull out his sword instead of his player. And he goes, sorry, buddy. He's like, you could always make another ranger. I can't just get another sun sword. And then he leaves. And Aaron wrote this funny post with like him having this discussion with his god. And if you'll indulge me for a moment, I am going to find this post because it's on a really old, an old web forum. And I will bring it up here. Let me find it. Shouldn't take too long. Oh, it's so good. Rapanathuk, here we go. All right. Dungy. Okay. Hopefully this is worth it. Okay. Go to here. Come on. Where is it? I know it's good. Here it is. I found it. Wow. Sweet. I'm awesome. All right, here. I'm gonna bring this up here. I'm gonna bring this up for you all to read. Nope. There we go. All right. So this is this post is from July 2nd, 2002. This is Aaron. He says, he says, I remember. So I had told, by the way, I had previously told my story to the accumulated people here. Let me find it. Oh, never mind. I told it afterwards. All right. So Aaron said, I remember one time me and my ranger friend went into the first level of Rapanathuk. The DM didn't tell us it was Rapanathuk. Instead, just kept referring to it as a forgotten keep. We were getting suspicious after the third death trap and type encounter. Anyways, our characters were about 9th level. I can't believe I remember that they were 9th level. And we're doing pretty well, obviously, when we came to the bathroom. Ranger boy takes a look down the toilet and out pops Dungy. Thinking it was odd, but going with it, of course the ranger attacked this abomination of nature. Dungy promptly engulfed him on his turn, and the ranger was swallowed up. This alarmed the paladin because 1, the ranger was his friend, and 2, he had just given the ranger his ring of protection +2 to borrow. The paladin charged the foul beast, wielding his sun sword, a holy sword the paladin had earned performing a holy quest for Lathander, and hit the creature, much to his sudden horror. Everyone here on this forum knows that the sword would get stuck to the creature. Pally, I make a strength action to pull the sun sword free. Ranger, what about me? Pally, you could always make another ranger, but you can't just go get another sun sword. Ranger, ... On a lucky roll of a nat 20 on the strength check, the paladin yoinked his sword out, said a quick prayer to his fallen friend, and ran for his life. To this day, I still remind my friend that he owes me a ring of protection +2. And then someone responded with, didn't your paladin have some trouble explaining the whole sacrifice my friend for my sword thing to his deity? So Aaron played out an imaginary conversation between him, his paladin, and his god, Lathander. So tell me, paladin, what was with the whole ditch the ranger, keep the sword, and flee for your pitiful life thing? You see, you're supposed to be a fearless warrior of good, serving a great cause. Well, I'm not that kind of paladin. What? What do you mean? I'm the kind of paladin that goes and really max down the undead. What about your code of honor, lawful good, etc., etc.? Yeah. I'm about that. I just focus more on the beating undead part. Let the god ... Well, what? I figure you can't get anything done with these pansy paladins running around in silk underwear. Dude, that was in the 2nd edition handbook for paladins, not in 3rd edition. Well, that aside, I mean, I figure you needed a badass paladin who goes and gets the job done. But you didn't even do that. You fled like a little girl. Well, it was a crab demon or something. A mimic, I think someone said. Wait, were you in Rapanathuk? I don't know. We were in some keep, in a graveyard, an inverted cross. First room was a death trap? Yeah. All right, what spells do you want today? I'll take the usual, please. Bless weapon. And so this is this is the post, me describing what, I was just talking about this. By the way, they were 4th level. Wow, I can't believe I remembered that. Here's where they retrapped the gelatinous cube in the pit trap, the T section, rolling a 19, only 1 thick pseudopod. And I said, by the way, the paladin who took his sword over his ranger's friend is in my group. He took a vow of silence on the 1st level of Rapanathuk. He was the rogue who cut off the wizard's arm. So Aaron not only let this guy die, he also cut off his arm in 2 different campaigns. So yeah, those were my Rapanathuk stories, amongst others. But those were 2 particularly good ones where fun times were had. And again, it's not really a combat because you can't really win against this creature. So yeah, sounds like Smith. This all checks out. Yes. Aaron likes to keep it interesting. Let's just say it that way. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. 2002. Crazy. You remember the details after 20 plus years. KC, that's why I play these games, man. I never went, and did any awesome, cool, crazy adventures with my friends that were real. I did them in pretend. And, when that's the power of D&D, that's the power of these games is, if you do it right and you have the right attitude and you have the right game system, you can create memories that your brain gets easily fooled into thinking in some weird way were real. So it's a very powerful thing. And it's one of the reasons I love these games. I'm just chasing that feeling. So, thank you to everybody for hanging out with us tonight. I'm going to let the patrons vote because we didn't get either tip goal, but we got enough to basically get one, but not both. So we'll have the patrons pick if we're going to either talk about world building or talk about the class champion. We'll say which one they want to go with. And then, but remember, next Thursday, I'm at Gen Con, so there's going to be no stream next Thursday. We have Root on Tuesday, but after that, we're going to have a little bit of a break. So no live streams from us for a little bit after next Tuesday's Root game, which should be no audio issues because we're going to be on mics the whole time. So thank you, everybody, for hanging out with me tonight. Thank you to my patrons for supporting myself, Aaron, Bob, and this awesome endeavor. Thank you, everybody who donated. Thank you to our champions, heroes, exalted legends, knights, squires, everybody. Really look forward to seeing you. If you're a member of the Patreon, look forward to seeing you on the Discord. Other than that, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Good night, everybody. Peace.